Okay. All right, we'll call the meeting back to order. Our next item up on our agenda is property tax refund program update from our good director of Department of Revenue, Miss Brenda Henson. Ms. Henson, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, Chairman Beitman, Co-Chairman Harshman, Brenda Henson, Director of the Department of Revenue. I appreciate the opportunity this afternoon to provide you with a brief summary of the 2022 tax year property tax refund program. This was a program that the legislature expanded last year, expanded the income criteria to allow more Wyoming homeowners to qualify, and also expanded the amount of those refunds. So in your packet, you'll see a document entitled Tax Year 2022 Property Tax Refund Program Summary. On that cover sheet, you'll notice the department received 9,943 applications statewide. Now, we did have a little over 200 of those applications where they started the process online, but they never submitted any documentation, never completed the application process. However, we did provide 8,813 refund checks statewide, and that would be compared to the 2021 property tax refund program where 3,085 checks were mailed out. The other significant difference in the 2 years, the average refund statewide in 2021 was $601.63. For 2022, that average refund amount, $937.68. Again, as a result of the changes that the legislature made in the 2023 session. The other item that I would note is in tax year 21, we saw 30% of our applications that did not qualify, compared to only 9% this year that did not qualify. And on the cover sheet, you'll find that 57% of the 900 that did not qualify were over the income limit. 25% were due to a lack of information in the verification process. And finally, there were 13% that were over the asset limit. I took the liberty of providing you with some additional information. So if you turn to what would actually be the third page if you include the cover sheet, I provide a little more details related to the 2022 refunds because I thought it was important for the committee to understand what was the amount that was being refunded. So of those 8,813 refund checks, we had 2,090 of those checks that were calculated at 75% of their property tax bill. What that means is the remaining number of applicants, 6,723, their property tax bills were above that 1/2 of the median residential property tax bill. So they received the maximum that was allowable under statute for their county. When you look at that second page, you'll actually see the percentages per county. So the percentages, just to show, for example, in Campbell County, 87% of the applicants that received a refund check in Campbell County received the maximum refund amount. And that was the $692.09. If you go down to the bottom of the page, that's where you'll see that 76% that received that maximum out of all of the applicants. I felt as you are contemplating tax relief in general, it would be important for you to have information to consider for 2023. As you know, the legislature will consider funding this particular program. And the last page of your document, because tax roll has been completed in all 23 counties, we're able to calculate that 2023 median residential property tax amount. And I've done the calculation so you can see the percentage increase from 22 to 23. All but 5 counties are seeing double-digit increases again for 2023. So what I have done is I've taken the 2022 amount and multiplied it by that percentage increase of what those medians have increased. And so as you can see in the report, where the program cost was $8,263,783.84 for 2022 refunds. If all we do is take those same applicants, don't change the criteria, and we just see those higher amounts, we anticipate an additional almost $1.4 million would be necessary to fund the program. I've estimated $9,652,467. So just something to consider in the future. As you know, appropriation wise, we started with 3 million for this program for the biennium. We used 1.8 million of that for the 2021 refunds, which left 1.2 million for the 2022 refunds. The legislature added an additional 5 million for 6.2, but as you can see, we went a couple million over that. So the governor's office was able to ensure that this program was fully funded, and we were able to get those checks out. The checks had to be out no later than September 30th. So we've completed processing this. The one thing that I just wanted to say, we don't always hear about some of those residents in the state. We had 2 folks that after they received their property tax refund check, they reached out to the department, and one of them literally said, you know what? I lied. I completely forgot about this inheritance that I have. And you have 2 taxpayers in the state of Wyoming that sent their refund checks back to the Department of Revenue because they realized they made a mistake. So that does your part good. With that, Mr. Chairman, be happy to answer any questions, but hopefully that gives you some idea of the number of property owners that did receive assistance from the legislature this past session.
Thank you so much, Director Henson. Are there any questions for the director? Senator French.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not a question, just a comment. I had an individual in Park County come up to me, and he was so thankful. It was unbelievable. He just went on and on and on. I said, oh, that it wasn't me alone. It was the entire legislature, and a lot of people were involved, but he was just so thankful. So it means a lot to a lot of people. So just a comment.
And if I may, Chairman Beitman, Senator French, I really want to thank all the folks who helped in getting the word out. The governor's office was very supportive, putting in press releases. We had county treasurers, county assessors, commissioners all across the state trying to make sure that property owners knew about that June 5th deadline. And the other piece of that, I see we've got AARP out here in the audience represented. They also did town hall meetings to get the word out. So very appreciative of that. And the other piece of that, just for information, we did have 5 counties that implemented the county optional refund program. Now, what that means is if their tax bill is under the median residential property tax amount, 1/2 of the median, that if we refunded 75% of their tax bill, the county, those 5 counties would refund the other 25%. If in fact the program where we gave them the median amount, let's just pick a county and say that in Albany County, they received a refund check from us for that median amount. I'll find it here quickly. So the median amount in Albany County was $1,062.55. Let's just say their tax bill was $3,000 and they qualified. They could get the additional $1,062.55 from the county program. Albany County, Converse County, Lincoln County, Sublette County, Teton County. Those applications were due by September 5th, and I know those county treasurers are, as we speak, administering and processing those refund requests. I think they've got until the end of December to get those checks out. So I truly believe there are folks out there that are trying to assist those that are that need relief the most.
Great. Thank you, Director. Any more questions for the Director? Co-Chairman Harshman.
Thank you, Chairman and Director. Appreciate all your hard work on this. And you know, when we changed those last year, it was this committee that ran the bill. Just maybe spell out, most of the committee's pretty new, just what those changes kind of were, where we went up to, you know, the state median income or the county median income and those kind of things. Just real briefly, please. Thank you.
Certainly.
And then my second question will be, you've seen the bill draft that we've got on the way we're gonna look at income, particularly social security, and maybe your comments on that.
Mr. Chairman, Co-Chairman Harshman. So I think the largest piece was prior, it was 50% of your tax bill. The legislation changed that to 75% of your tax bill, still leaving that with a maximum of 1/2 of the median residential property tax bill is that key piece. The other piece related to the income levels went to 125% of household income as compared to I believe it was 75% of household income in prior years. So that was a significant change. So we're seeing the household income numbers increasing along with the median residential amount. I should say those estimates that I gave you for 2023 only reference the median residential tax bill. We don't have the income numbers for the next year. So we'll have that for you for the session. So with that, hopefully that helped with that question. And
Just,
then
in that number, the median state income, it was the county or the state, whatever was, maybe give us that number, that median state. Do you remember that? It was,
so the median maximum income ultimately was $86,400 per household. So if your income in Wyoming, household income, was less than $86,400, you could qualify for the program. There are some counties where that median household income exceeded the 86.4, and then you had a higher amount enabling more folks.
like Teton, Campbell, those were some that were over 100, I think. Even.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've got that information here with me.
Yeah, and
So yes, Teton County, that household median income at the 125% was $128,900. The other piece to note is in Teton County, the maximum tax refund that could be provided was $4,242.94. Meaning that the median residential property tax bill in Teton County hovered a little less than $9,000.
All right. Any more questions for the director? Yes, Representative Byron.
Thank you, Director Henson. Can you, you briefly mentioned this, and it's been a statewide discussion about this being, you know, tax issue unique to only a few counties. And for those that don't have this great material in front of them, can you mention again how many of the 23 counties saw double-digit increases from 22 to 23?
Director?
22 to 23 on that last page of your document, Mr. Chairman, Representative. So Goshen, Natrona, Platte, Sweetwater, and Uinta are less than 10% increase from 22 to 23. The remaining counties anywhere from 13%. The highest, again, increased Teton County, 31% again from 22 to 23.
Thank you. Okay, committee, any more questions? Director, do you have anything else?
Mr. Chairman, Co-Chairman Harshman, you mentioned the bill that we'll be considering. I had a short opportunity to look at that bill. Obviously, some significant changes. The first of which would be instead of gross income to make it taxable income. We all know that what is deducted off gross income is different, specific to each individual. So we know that that in itself, that definition will change the cost of this program. There's no doubt. The other piece is breaking down the levels, tying your percent of household income to various levels and what amount you could get refunded. that will take some significant programming. And I'll tell you, if we don't automate this program, if I did not have the software that Enterprise Technology Services had propped up for me last year, there is no way we could have processed these applications. And so it will take some time to get that programming in place. The other piece that I would say is there is a little bit of a concern on my part in that I had some legislatures reach out and say the application's a little confusing, or taxpayers are not exactly sure what the refund would be. That's with the current statute. If the other bill were to pass, and I'm not saying yay or nay, I'm just saying that until we actually process their refund, we're probably not going to be able to tell them what their refund amount will be until we get through that process. So it's just knowing that there's going to be a little more time involved related to educating the public to the program and what's available.
All right, thank you so much. All right, committee, anything else? All right, Director.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any public comment on the property tax refund program? Seeing none in the room, and what do we got on Zoom? Nothing. Okay, well, committee, any committee directives? Discussion. Okay, we're ready to work. With that, we'll close out property tax refund program. Skip the break and we'll go right into tax limits presentation with our good friend, Mr. Meyer, if he's around. Mr. Meyer is not here yet, is he? He's walking in the door. Okay. Gentlemen, lady, welcome to the Joint Revenue Committee. Sorry, we rushed you there a little bit. We got through the last topic in blazing speed.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, committee members. I'm Debbie Larson, Lincoln County Assessor. So I'm just going to give you a little background, and then I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Meyer. Pat Meyer is starting his fourth term as assessor, previously first deputy assessor for 20 years, legislative committee for 13 years, up to 2,000 hours of education and appraisal assessment, tax administration and tax policy, permanently certified since 1989. Paul Fall just started his 7th term, 25th year as assessor, has been on the legislative committee since 2000. Past president of the Assessors Association, has 100,000 plus hours of education in the assessment field, has been permanently certified since 2003. Terry Call, 13 years in the assessor's office, first deputy, permanently certified and member of IAAO, and approximately 600 hours of education. Again, I'm Debbie Larson, Lincoln County Assessor. I'm in my 9th term as assessor, served off and on the legislative committee, have over 1,000 hours of continuing education, and have been permanently certified since 1991. Basically, as we all know, if there's a problem, it's best if you try to come forth with solutions. So we appreciate you taking the time to listen to the presentation to give you a possible solution to consider.
Well, thank you for that introduction, and we have a lot of horsepower here at the table, so we're interested in hearing what you have to say. And who wants to start us off?
Presentation. Okay, I just need, how do I get on it? Well. See your. You want. Yeah. You just need to see the same one. Right. Okay. Okay, Mr. Chairman, I'm back in business.
All right, we're ready.
Okay. Okay. Property tax system, budget-based rates versus fixed rates, scrap it and start all over or fix what we have. Many taxpayers in Wyoming have been demanding tax relief. These are the questions we're here to answer. Why tax relief? What did taxpayers get? Can and should Wyoming be doing more? How does Wyoming rate? I'm going to go through this a little quick. We rate really good as of 2020 policy. You could probably have this and you've read it. We were doing great. You know, that's what we were doing in 2020. The numbers show that on average, everything is just fine with Wyoming's tax policy, that Wyoming is one of the states to which people flee to escape from high taxes. So what's the problem? The world changed in 2020. For many, Wyoming's property tax system failed. By 2022, most counties felt the impact. Tax increases. Property tax increases with property values in Wyoming. Average percent change since 2014, as you can see. We were doing pretty well till 2021. 2021, as you'll see later, some counties started going into double digits, but not everybody. By 2022 and 2023, we really started seeing big increases, especially in certain counties, big, but everybody started seeing more. Wyoming wages have not increased at the same rate, as you can see. 2014 all the way to 2023. Looks like in 2023 we started going up, but all in all, for our wages and for some of the counties, the average prices of house skyrocketed. Wyoming wages versus property tax. These dramatic increases do not feel fair to Wyoming folks. Low-income taxpayers can't afford it. Longtime residents feel pushed out. Most retirees have not budgeted for 20% or more increases per year. Now, just on a footnote is 2024 is going to be really bad for Park County again, up already 18%. So we've been doing this for 4 years going on. Possibly our average house will be $500,000 this year. Why something should be done? Total residential value percent increase since 2014. Some counties began in 2021. I've highlighted a lot of those for you, I believe, on the screen. So you can see Sheridan and Park County mirror each other. We go up the same, our average houses are the same. We both have the mountains. People are coming there not to work, they're coming to retire. Lincoln County as well. Why something should be done. Wyoming County's change in residential assessed value from 2022 to 2023. You can see there that most people are now in double digits, all but one county, and I'm sure they'll catch up someday. Wyoming County's change in average residential market value from 22 to 23. And you can go down through 23, you'll see people like Sheridan at 425, Park is at 428, I believe, and so forth for the average and the median, but everybody's going up some on there. This shows the average mean and the percent increase, and you can see where it started, 2021, and then just skyrocketing and probably going to continue. Someday it'll level off. Park County has a little bit more of a problem because the people who are coming are usually out of states and they're still paying cash. So they're not dealing with the interest rates that are going on right now. And I'm sure that's true with Sheridan County. Taxpayers repeatedly say, I don't mind paying my fair share. It's the big increases that I have the problem with, which has always been the problem. Increases, although it wasn't bad before, but people would come in, if their house went up $75, you had to explain why. Well, they don't come in for $75 anymore. They come in for hundreds of dollars, $1,200 a year, and so forth. Application of average or median figures statewide doesn't account for the diverse economic situations that the counties are in. Example, consider the average market value change in 2022, 2023 for Goshen County, up 10.2% versus Lincoln, 25.83%. Counties experience varying level of property value growth and cost of living. We can't go from 9.5 to 8.5 level of assessment without hurting Goshen and other counties. So if you just drop the assessment rate, it's not going to save us that much. Park County, their average house is $428,000. It will save you $300 off your tax bill. And for Park County and Sheridan County, that's just nothing more than a Band-Aid. We're not even going to notice that we gave that. What is it about Wyoming's system that drives such large increases in taxes? Two fundamental approaches. You guys have heard me talk about them before: budget-based rates and fixed rates. Those are the two systems that are used in the United States. Fixed rate use predetermined rates. Budget-based rates vary based on revenue needs. Rate-based approach will lead to a higher tax bill with increasing assessed values. So if your value goes up, your taxes are going up. Budget-based rates divides the tax liability based on the budget needs. So just because your value goes up on a budget rate state does not mean your tax bill is going to go up. It's according to your needs in that particular case. Neither is perfect, and we'll get into that more. Wyoming's property tax system, rate-based, which is not best in an unstable market, which means our mineral market, because we go up and down all the time. I can remember just 4 years ago when Park County lost $100 million off oil and gas production. $100 million, it would take you to build the whole town of Powell over with an average house to make up for that, because they're at 100%, we're at 9.5%. Fixed rate, it's pretty much just what I said. With fixed rates, if you need money, if you need the money, you can't raise the rates by county per county. You can't just raise it up. On a budget-based system, If you need more money, you can raise it up, but if you have more money, you can just lower the rates. So you're not paying as much. Comparing the formulas, it's that simple. Fixed rate, it's the budget equals the assessed value times the levy gives you the budget. Budget-based rates, it's different. It's budget divided by the assessed value gives you the levy rate. So that levy is not going to be up as high on a budget-based system. When we're comparing the three situations under a budget-based and a rate-based system, situation assessed values decrease 10% for all property. Wyoming on the rate-driven system, which is what Wyoming is on, taxing district receives 10% less revenue from the property tax. On a budget-based rate system, if they still need the money, the levy rates rise by the mathematical inverse, which is about 11% of the value decrease. The same overall amount of property is then collected. The second situation, assessed values increase 10% for all property. On a rate-based system, taxing districts receive 10% more revenue from the property tax. Levy rates on a budget-driven system, levy rates fall by the mathematical inverse of about 9% of the value increase. The same overall amount of the property tax is generated. Simply. Go ahead. When values skyrocket, rate-based, Wyoming takes all the money and we find something to do with it. Whether we need it or not, this is what's been going on. We take the money because it's kind of easy to figure out what you can spend the money on, whether you need it or not. And this does happen. Budget-based spreads out the tax liability and can lead to lower individual liabilities. Budget-based, the taxpayers divide the tax liability based upon the actual budget needs. Rate-based, the tax rate has been decided. The taxpayers will pay taxes based upon the rate, regardless of the need, which is just what I just said. Challenges of Wyoming's rate-driven system. Rapidly rising property valuation causing significant tax increases, which is what we're going through now. Limited relief options, except veterans exemption and the refund program when funded. Don't know how long you're going to keep funding it, but for now, level of assessment, 9.5 residential is controlled at the state level by statute, not locally. On a budget-based rate, that's decided locally for your needs. And when you're just adjusting the rate, that's the same for everybody. And with our diverse counties, probably not a good idea. Not one of our, it would be something, I'm not going against it, we take it, but I think there's better answers. All counties with or without hot real estate markets are assessed the same. The Lincoln Land Institute of Land Policy points out a major drawback of Wyoming's rate-based system. A rate-driven system begins with a given tax rate and automatically applies that to the annual taxable value. Such a system justifies taxpayers' fear that increases in assessed values will automatically translate into high tax bill, which is what's going on right now. What did Wyoming taxpayers receive to manage the shortcomings of the tax systems? Tax refund for income qualified taxpayers. Proposed constitution amendment where we're going to pull residential out of the all other category, and the acquisition cost study. Maybe more could be done. What do other states do? About half the states limit property tax increase. The total number depends on how one defines limits, such as limits to the mills, limits to tax dollars, or limits to the level of assessment. So we have studied all 50 states, and I've probably given a lot of you that report for there. Now Montana limits property tax increase to 1/2 the average rate of inflation for the past 3 years. One idea. Utah is budget-based and is the truth in taxation law requires public hearings over increases above a threshold, which is ideally the Lincoln Land Institute. I mean, I've spoken with these guys many a times now, would love everybody to be on, that's really that's a key one. But Tulsa, Oklahoma has a tax cap and uses the same CAMA software as Wyoming. So that's the computer assisted mass appraisal system. They're on the same one we are. They've designed rules, they've implemented it. They have rules on the implementation. So we could administer this, this is nothing new. We are copying from other states. Arizona has a well-organized system that limits tax increases to 5%. Some counties use the same CAMA software as well as Wyoming does. So we've got Arizona and Oklahoma that we've looked into extensively, and we like those. Challenges of Wyoming's rate-driven system. In Wyoming's tax system, if Wyoming's tax system were budget-based, some other states, counties such as Teton, Park, Sheridan, or Lincoln could lower their level of assessment on residential property, while more stable counties such as Goshen or Hot Springs would not have to. Because if they're not a mineral county, we're different, they need money, so it's hard to just lower their stuff. Some might say we should simply adjust the mill levies. However, in practice, that's not happened. The obvious downside would be the significant loss of production revenue to coal, oil, natural gas counties. You lower a mill, you lose, in Park County, you'd lose $375,000, and the taxpayer would receive $40 less on his tax bill. Since budget-based approach is better than fixed rate based in an unstable market, it might seem best for Wyoming to overhaul its property tax system and switch to a budget-based approach. A switch to budget-based would require significant changes to the Wyoming Constitution and statutes, especially with respect to school revenue. In Wyoming, we're to manage a switch to a budget-based system. The revenue from oil and gas may be significantly reduced. Therefore, it would seem unlikely there would be much support for such a change. When Wyoming's market becomes less volatile, some might wish we still were on the fixed rate system, since fixed rate is best in stable markets. Special district statutes could adapt to a budget-based system. Their rates may vary. We have the cemetery, hospital, fire, museum, county, weed and pest, and other district statutes not to exceed mill limits. So they could take less, but they don't. You don't know what's going to happen the following year, if you're going to have the money. There's a reason for that too. And we, like the county commissioners, have no control, Mr. Chairman, over that. Senator French will tell you that. We fought that for years, that, people, they exceed their budgets, they get the max, and nobody has control of it, but they have their own boards. So therefore, rarely do they lower them. Cemetery districts in Park County started doing that after we got after them, because they had so much money in reserves, so they kind of felt bad about keeping all that. School funding statutes make a change to budget-based difficult. Schools are mandated to collect their full mills. They shall be levied. Their full mills by statute. So they're always going to get their 25, their 12, and their 6. Not to mention they all get 1 mill for recreational districts in those schools. So it's actually more than just the 25, 6, and 12. School funding statutes make a change to budget-based difficult. In many counties, the schools are 70% of our budgets, you know, so without them in the game of lowering stuff, the special districts, it's just, it's not going to work out for us. The Lincoln Land Institute of Land Policy acknowledges Wyoming's problem. The main problems are a failure to reduce tax rates when values rise precipitously. The best protections are well-functioning assessments and rate-setting procedures, such as the truth in taxation, which was the one I had just told you about, of where if you want to raise it, it got to go in front of it has to go in front of the voters on certain things. If you go over a threshold and you want more money, it has to get voted on. Also, budget-based states have tax revolts too. Kansas and Nebraska recently fought for the truth in taxation laws for their budget-based systems because people start budgeting more than they need. They can do that way too, you know, and they have their own boards. They didn't need the money and so forth. Tax caps take care of the primary weakness of Wyoming's rate-based system. They act as a buffer to validity. What should Wyoming do? Wyoming could overhaul its statutes to have a budget-based property tax system. These are the advantages and disadvantages. Alternatives, without overhauling systems, continue funding the tax refund bill, homestead exemptions, separate residential property from all others and change the statute language to allow limits. While doing that, could separate others as well, agricultural, commercial, personal property, so that we don't have to revisit this in the future. Arizona has 9 classes of property and Montana has 18 different ones. I mean, I don't know why our forefathers actually gathered personal property, residential, commercial, and agricultural. A lot of them have they don't have much in similar to them. I mean, I'm not saying change anything on them. I'm just saying, let's pull them out in case we got to go back to them. Simple changes for Wyoming: cap property value growth to manage tax increases. Use a method like Arizona's property tax cap. There's nothing special about the choice of 5% for Arizona. Could base the rate on average or medium of historic increases over time. It's not the only rational method, of course, just something we're toying with. If you look at what we've been doing since 96, I'm only going up to 2021. In 2021, and this is with new construction, the state average was 6.99 or 7%. The medium is like 6.44%. Tax caps in Arizona. Arizona lists 2 values for each residence, and Wyoming could too: market value and taxable value. In Arizona, there are called fair cash value and limited property value. Fair cash value is market value, and it's changed annually. So we're not really changing our valuing at market value. We'd be going through the same things we are right now. Limited property value is the value of which the property is taxed. Limited property value is limited to 5% growth in Arizona per year and can never exceed fair cash value or fair market value. Each year, regardless of whether it sells and what it sells for, taxable property value increases no more than 5% unless there are additions or significant changes to the property. Purchase price does not directly affect a subject property value. There are some what ifs associated with this system that are clearly handled in Arizona, equivalent to the Department of Revenue rules. Rules could easily be adopted by Wyoming.
Co-Chairman Hart.
Thank you. Assessor Meyer, just for clarification, so the cap in Arizona, the 5% is on the market value, or is it on the what we
It-
call, I
it-
think, assessed value, but they call it the LPV, I guess.
Limited tax value just means if your house was valued at 100,000 last year, it will go up no more than 5%.
To 105,000.
That's correct.
Okay, so that's for us, the fair market value of your
That's
house
correct.
only goes up 5%.
Right.
I wasn't sure whether it was that or the assessed value.
I understand, but
Which
no, it's
might be a
just,
little different.
let's just talk market value.
Yeah, okay.
Okay,
Thank you, Mr.
we're
Chairman.
just talking market value now. In Arizona, the tax burden is not transferred to the new homeowner as they are to be valued and taxed the same as limited property values of similar home. This stops the big inequity in limits, and not everybody does this. You know, so if you buy this and your house has been limited after your study, it doesn't go all the way to market value. It goes to limited tax value too, for equality. But there are states that do go directly to market value and let everybody, that's kind of what we were talking about with acquisition. Where acquisition, they get it and the people down here don't get it. And that's what causes so much inequities around. We happen to like Arizona's way of doing things, providing, of course, we can still provide services and so forth, which we'll get to. Advantages of tax caps. Counties with lower revenues, they're not really unaffected because a lot of them, they don't go up more than 3 to 5%, depending on what you set it at. You know, maybe right now, yeah, they could go up more or just depending. We'll talk about that in a minute. Taxpayers in high increase counties are not penalized because we're stopping it. Because we didn't really need that money because we've been living off 7% increases for 30 years. Consistent treatment for all residential homeowners. Property tax liabilities are stabilized from year to year. Greater predictability. You would know what your taxes aren't going any more than that for the year. I wrote down some of the typical questions because sometimes Representative Swanister taught me this years ago. Sometimes once we're here and you leave, you don't get to come back up and answer any questions. So I'm going to just go through some of the questions. What is the base year for the caps? What should we start it at? I mean, do we start it at 2024 or 2020? Of course, this will be a legislative decision. This will be your decision. You know, 21, as I showed you, was the first year for a lot of counties to get into double digits. And now we all went 22, 23, and I only know about Park County and probably Sheridan County going up again in 2024. So that'll be one of your decisions. What to change? All other property, real and personal, should be broken out. I mean, we just think you should be breaking out why we're doing a constitutional amendment, breaking out residential, commercial, agricultural, and personal property. How to calculate the cap. Again, this is just an idea. It's just something we came up with. We're just saying the proposal, use a 10-year sliding scale of the medium or the average increase in residential value, not including new construction. Okay, so when we start out in 2006, that's the first 10 year. And then it goes to the next 10 years, 9.75, all the way down. We're even using 2022 and 2023. So the average would be 8.83%. And the median would be 5.47%. And this is all statewide, of course. Let's talk about the burden. Limited property value is transferred to new owners in a sale. New houses are given the same limited property value to fair cash value ratio as others in their neighborhood. That's according to if we went with that, if we went with our suggestion there. Do tax caps shift the burden? Wyoming is rate based. We take all the taxes we can unless limited. If limited, We don't take it from somewhere else. Some states are budget based. They create a budget and spread the tax liability. If some properties hit the limit, they may take the tax money from properties that have not hit the limit. Wyoming property A, valuation increases by 20%. Taxes will not increase more than the limit, 5%. Wyoming property B, valuation increases by 2%. Taxes will not increase by more than 2%. But don't we need the money? Well, no, for 30 years, we've been living off 4 to 7% increases. So to go to 20 to 45% in some areas, no, we don't need it. What is industry's position? You know, and I'm looking at commercial and industry, and they, in general, as you can see, let's look at industry. You can see they go up 4.9%, a medium 3.7%. But if we would, we're just using 2000 up to 2021. If we would have put in 2023, they're up 12.8%. It's just something to consider in the future, depending on if you needed that money. I've heard about bonds, the bonds issue, that there's inequity there. The limit increases effectively to taxes, not market values. The example states Arizona has no problems with bonds. When you get a bond issue, say you wanted to build a recreational center and your city or your county voted, we're going to do a bond issue. You're going to pay mill levies every year on that bond issue. And if your valuation goes lower, you're probably going to have to raise your mill levy on the bond in some cases and on the principal. But in the end, they voted on it and they get rewarded with the new recreational systems, recreational center. So we don't feel that's a big deal. And I'm going to turn this over now to Paul Fall and right now, take her home.
Thank you, Mr. Meyer, Mr. Chairman, if I may. We'll see if we can get this done. So the bottom line, taxpayers couldn't care less about what our tax system is called or the ins and outs of how it works. They don't care to see the data that shows how we have it so great. Taxpayers demand fair taxes. Skyrocketing property taxes don't feel fair. Tax caps can provide relief and fair treatment. Wyoming has done well with 4 to 7% increases for 30 years in most counties. Government has proven that can operate at historic increased levels. Tax caps could make it the law to budget based on historical increases. Caps take away the main weakness of rate-based. They fix the part that is broken.
Mr. Fall, I think we have a question for you from Senator French.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A question for Pat Myers. If we back up to where you started on questions, what is the base year for caps? You were talking about Arizona 5%.
Well, they're past that now. They're on the regular. They've already done this. They've been on it for 20 years.
Right.
So there is no base rate. I'm talking about Wyoming. Do we go back to when this problem started or do we continue from 2024?
Right.
That's your decision.
That's where I'm trying to go here. If we back up to 2021 and there's a 5% cap, say, how does explain to me, how does that work? If we back it up to 2021 and a 5% cap and my taxes went up 25% that year, the next year went up 40%. Do those property taxpayers get a refund or how does that work?
Mr.
Meyer?
Chairman, Senator French, it wouldn't work like that. All we'd be doing is going, in my mind, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong, we would start at 21 with that value and do 5% for 22, 5% more for 23, 5% more for 24, and that would be the new limited tax value on that.
Senator Ide has a question. Senator Ide.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Along those same lines, just so I understand this correctly, with the example you used on $100,000 home and the next year, caps out at 105 if that's less than whatever inflation or index or whatever they're using. But on this limited, what do you call it? Limited property values, say you do a transfer, a sale, what you're referring to here, and that sale is $150,000. Is that basis still $105,000 to that new home buyer? Thank you,
If it's-
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Meyer.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Ike. Yes, that they would not go to the 150,000. They would remain at the 105,000 because everybody else in that neighborhood, as we analyze, that would be it. Yes.
Yeah, Mr. Co-Chairman.
On that same subject, assessors, and any of you could answer, but that's Arizona. Some states do have true up or catch up mechanisms on a sale, or like you have a 6% year, 1 year and 0 the next. You did your 5 on that year and you still owe 1 to keep it that fair market value. So some states do, Arizona does not though. Is that
That's correct, Mr. Chairman, but our thing would be to analyze this every year, we don't want 5%. We certainly don't want it in the Constitution. We don't know what the percentage is, but I think the legislation should have the ability, especially since we're going statewide, to change that. I mean, what if minerals went way down? You might want to raise that. I mean, residential people and everybody might have to pay more money, so you could raise the increase level. So instead of 5%, maybe you needed money then and you could raise it to 10%. It would be according to your needs though, instead of just keeping it at one spot.
Okay, sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Fall. Please continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So what are we asking for? We just talked about this constitutional amendment, breakout classes of property for the legislature, define house valued. Residential, sounds like you already got that one going, but you might look at the agricultural, commercial and industrial. So maybe 5 years down the road, we don't have to come back to do a constitutional amendment on the commercial if, we get the commercial people left out, I guess, so to speak. Change the statutes, Title 39.
Yeah.
We'll have to,
Can I just ask a question there? I mean, Mr. Chairman, thanks. Industrial is broken out. And you're
Sorry.
talking about further breakouts of the all other, which would be ag and commercial and personal property. Is
right,
that?
right.
And
I'm sorry,
and
Mr. Chairman,
So you
yes.
would like us to really amend that constitutional amendment we had to really break those out even further? Is that?
Mr. Chairman, yes, we would, but we don't want to hurt the residential coming out. We definitely want that to be standalone. But we're thinking while you're doing it, why not just do them all standalone? And then if we have to look at the other properties down the road, then they're already available.
Okay, thank
All
you.
right.
Mr.
All right. And finally, instead of looking at how much money we will lose, which we always do, how about we look at how much money we're still going to make on a property tax cap or any other type of caps that we can do or acquisition. And we're just, want you guys to understand this presentation to show there is other options out there. And, the property cap is, I think, pretty viable for Wyoming. And if you guys need any more research from us, we're all more than willing to put in the time for it. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. That was very informative. Appreciate it.
Stand for any other questions that you need.
Any
We'll stand for
questions?
any other questions you may have.
What do we have? Okay,
Uh,
co-chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I echo the chairman's comments. Appreciate all your work and your service in your communities, and being the assessor, county assessor now is a interesting job, and a lot of Wyoming where you've had, so you've got a lot of public service. Appreciate it. I think too, if you can in the future, I mean, in the next couple of weeks, maybe kind of give us in like a, in kind of a grid format, these 24 states, and maybe you have that, or maybe it seems like I've seen it, and just kind of I think the thing that Wyoming has going for it that's really good is our constitution has required it, is this full value. And that, that's a constitutional charge to us. And then we define it as that fair market value. And it sounds like Arizona still has that number. I mean, they have, we don't want to lose that, because then you start losing this equity among taxpayers when you don't really know what is fair market value. The full value is required by our constitution. So I'm kind of interested in that, how other states, keep an eye on that, on our constitutional charge of full value. I don't know if that question makes any sense, but
Mr. Chairman, it does. And on their assessment schedules, Oklahoma, Arizona's and several others, again, we never lose fair market value, what you can get for your house on the market. It's always listed. And right next to it, it's listed limited tax value. In fact, Paul Fall's sister lives in Arizona and they sent me a schedule that shows just that. Fair market value, they call it fair cash value, it's the same thing. And limited tax value, you always get two of those. Limited tax value can never go over fair market value. So if we see a big drop, it's never going to go below fair market value. If the market goes, it's never going below that.
Mr. Fall.
Can I,
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, can I follow up to that? And on that, they still show like we do the previous year, current year. So they show, well, here's what your value would be. And in my sister's case, her house would have doubled in 2 years. So it shows fair market value. Then it shows the limited property value at the 5% increase. So you're still seeing where you would technically be at full fair market value. So it's.
Yeah, Senator Ide.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Real quick, I'll be brief. We keep hearing conversation about carbon residential out of all other property class, which is ag and commercial and personal property, essentially, as the co-chairman mentioned. I know the commercial property owners have a lot of the same issues right now. They're not as vocal and there's not as many properties, obviously, so the numbers aren't out there. Can you kind of comment on that, and why you guys are pushing to divide all of these up into a separate property class? And I know you mentioned earlier, you don't know why we group those all together. You made that comment. I've always kind of wondered that as well, but it seems like we're cherry picking here a little bit. And can you explain that to us? Thank you.
Sure. Mr. Meyer?
Sure, Mr. Chairman, Senator Ide. Other states limit commercial property as well. I mean, it's just not residential property. We're working on the residential taxpayers, but it's out there. That's why we wanted to pull them out in case you want to see, because raising commercial property, you can have the same problems, just like you're saying. That's why we want to bring it out now. So when it happens, which it could very well, I mean, if taxes go way up and all of a sudden you get vacancies and you can't rent your building, it becomes a problem for the commercial owner as well. So that's why we want them out. And that's why we already have industry out, I know, and personal property. We've looked at that many a years for that tax. And agricultural, they would be getting limited property value on their residential house and their 1 acre of land that is valued at market value. So that would happen. But what if things start happening it's just a good idea, we think, to separate them out now.
Co-chairman?
thank you, Mr. Chairman. Back to this, full cash value and limited property value. And I'm back on that slide. I don't know, on your tax caps in Arizona. I think you said something, I don't know if I heard it right though. So in a downturn, you said did you say full cash value could drop below limited property value?
No.
Would not drop. I just want to.
Mr. Chairman, it would never drop below limited tax value. Fair market value can never drop below that. It can go to there. I mean, if you had the limited, no, it can never do that.
So let's just go back to like the 2008 crash, and Arizona is a great example of that, where you had these $400,000 homes going under 100,000, And so say you had your full cash value at 400 and your limited was at 300 and it drops to 100, they're both going to 100, then they're going to be equaled out there.
It
We
would,
kind of start over.
Mr. Chairman, it would just be going back to fair market value. It would surpass limited and it can't surpass limited.
Right.
So limited would be off the table. If it went down to 100,000, it would be valued at 100,000 if that was the market.
And that would be a reset then on the limited property value too, then.
That's
Basically.
correct.
Yeah.
Then you'd start all over again.
Start over. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Pappas.
Yeah, thank you. Can you tell me which you would prefer? I looked at Utah's law that they passed in 85, the truth and taxation law, versus the Arizona model. And it seems to me they come up with I think they call it a certified tax rate. So that if for instance, you increase 30%, so you figure that tax, but then you come up with a formula where it's reduced by a certain percentage so that the income is equal. And then if the state or the entity wants to increase that, they wouldn't have their hearing, as you mentioned earlier. And that's excluding any new growth. New growth is not in that. It's only existing properties. So, if they collected $1.2 billion last year, then that's what they would collect this next year, plus new growth, versus just the cap model at Arizona. Which do you think would work best for Wyoming?
Well, for Wyoming, we think in this predicament to go to they're on a budget-based system. To go there be a struggle. It'd be a long range. You need tax policy experts to come in, not just a group of assessors, to show you how to go from that to there. And again, they have problems too, I mean, you're talking truth and taxation. Once you're on a budget-based system, it took these other states quite a while just to get to the truth and taxation. You got to pass that through the voters and so forth. So it would be hard. There are budget-based systems that still have limits to how far you can go up. They have a little easier time because they can lower their rates and they can raise their rates according to their needs. But there are, even in budget-based states, limitations on quite a few, I believe, and there was like 9 states that actually didn't have any kind of a limit to them. So there are limits in them. It's a little more complicated to explain, but there's different, there are limits in budget-based systems. We believe to fix that one part of the rate-based fixed system is probably Wyoming's best option if we can pull residential out of there and make sure we can also value them now at your discretion at a limited tax value of what you guys decide, whether it's 5 or 10% or whatever you think. We just showed you an example, but you have a bill out with an inflationary thing, and some of those 25 states do use the inflation rate, and which is lower than this or that. And I will send you that information, and you'll be able to go to that state and even find out more. And you'll see what some of them are at 10, some are at 5, some do commercial, some do residential. I can resend that whole 50 state study to you. You can go into even more in depth. We just wanted to kind of figure out a solution now for the long-term goal. We realize nothing's going to happen till 2024, except for we could be ready to make that change, because in most of those states, everyone that we've read about, the voters overwhelmingly pass tax limits. When you mention the word, because that's what everybody who's speaking is after today.
Thank you, Mr. Meyer. And it reminds me of the testimony this morning from the folks that lived in California. Sounds like what they liked most about it was the cap portion. They knew that their property values weren't gonna, or their tax burden wasn't gonna increase exponentially, unexpectedly over the course of a couple of years. They knew they had that certainty, and that's what they were after ultimately.
That's correct, Mr. Chairman. Even if you are using acquisition, you'd have to be talking about tax caps. Like
the same.
California's 2%, just what we are now. We're just coming up with market value in a different way and a more uniform way, you know. I wasn't gonna get into acquisitions, you know, I'll let you guys handle that stuff. Because we knew California was the only one. We've been really researching this for 2 years. So we knew you weren't going to find any other states that was using acquisition. So it's simply Prop 13 that you're dealing with.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have any questions? Anybody else? Assessors, do you have anything else to add for us, or you all set?
I believe we're okay. We really like the idea of quit figuring out how much money you're gonna lose. How much money do you need to keep government and keep services going?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Paul?
Mr. Chairman, I will say one thing. Property tax relief in some form. I know you guys are going to do something this year and you have a heck of a tough job in front of you. I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you. Thank you for all that information. Okay, where are we at? Public comment. Is there any public comment on tax limits? See Ms. Huxtable coming on up. Feel like the price is right. Come on down. Welcome.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Appreciate this opportunity to visit a little bit. You had some great input here from our fellow assessors. And we have nothing but respect and honor for all the hard work that they've put into this. And they have been working on it for quite a few years. The Assessors Association, did I tell who I was? Dixie Huxtable, Converse County Assessor. I apologize. It was right here on the top of my list too. Today, I'm going to talk on behalf of the County Assessors Association, and I have our president from Sweetwater County with me. We did meet last week after we had an opportunity to look at the bills and the presentation that you just heard. Every one of us at that meeting, there was 21 of 23 participating, realized there's a problem. We know we need to fix this. We don't have the answers. We focus on how can we administer it and what are the consequences. And so the first hurdle that the assessors recognized was the Constitution. And so presuming that hurdle gets taken care of, we moved on and said, okay, what do we need to do to help with the property tax cap limit bill? And what are the issues that we need to make sure that everybody understands? And obviously it can be administered. It is in other jurisdictions, depending on how the legislature drafts the language, the parameters, that can be administered. The amount of the limit or the cap, that was where we started to diversify a little bit. You have a vast variation in this state. You have counties that depend a lot on property taxes, and you have those that do not depend on it at all. Of those that depend on property taxes, some of them, 30% of it comes from residential, others 3%. There's just a wide variety out there of the 23 counties. And when you start limiting residential in some of those counties, it becomes a big deal. It is revenue. And I understand that Assessor Meyer spoke that we've survived for 4 to 7 years, or 4 to 7% over the last 30 years, but some counties may not agree with that. Some of the assessors in some of those counties shared with us that it's been in the last couple of years, they've been able to give employee benefits. It's just in recent years that they've been able to fully fund their offices. So I'm not sure it's fair to say that every county can survive. So we asked as an association if there was some way to do that limit or cap jurisdiction specific. We didn't have time to delve into it, and we worked with Pat and his group, and we're still working on that. That would be the best of all worlds, if that cap could be jurisdiction specific, so you're not hurting any of those that do really rely on it, and yet you're giving significant help to those counties that need it in those higher valuation areas. The other part of the discussion, one of it was, when does the property reset to fair market value, or should it ever reset to fair market value? There was disparity there. Should they, when they buy that property for 300,000 that's been valued at 150, should they ever have to go to that 300,000? There was discussion. No right or wrong answer, just a lot of discussion. What about improvements, additions? You buy a house, you tear it down, you rebuild it. Should that stay at that original price? We do not have building permits in most of the counties in Wyoming. I think you heard some of that this morning through that acquisition study. Most of the municipalities and the towns do have building permits, but a lot of your counties do not. There is no way to know when that improvement happens. And if it's not important, that's okay. But if it's important that we pick it up for some, should we not be picking it up for all? What about new construction? A brand new house. Dad gives you the land and you build a house. How do you value that? Should it be at its fair market value, or should it be capped at what somebody else's house close to it that's been built for 20 years would be? I don't have those answers, and I'm not suggesting the answers, but those are all things that have to be considered when you look at this. And we are supportive of the property tax limits theory. There's just a lot of things to work out. As Pat showed in his presentation, a lot of that stuff is up to the legislature to decide. We just want to be here to help. If there's any questions you have that we can plug into our data, we all know our data best, and we can plug that in and do some analysis. If we can be of help in any way, we're there to help. And with that, I would stand for any questions, and I don't know if my partner has anything to say or not.
Mr. Chairman, I'm Dave Deepus. I'm the Sweetwater County Assessor, and my term as president of our association ended like 3 days ago. So I'm no longer the president. Melissa Schinkel from Teton County is, but she was unable to attend. I just want to echo what Assessor Huxtable said. We're here to help. I mean, you guys get the phone calls, but we get phone calls from all of the taxpayers in our jurisdictions, and we are dealing with this during the appeal period, right after the assessments go out. We are explaining the process. We are going through the values. We're showing the sales. We're doing this on a day-to-day basis with our taxpayers, and we are here to help, and we do see what it's doing to people. I'm in Sweetwater County. Sweetwater County had the lowest residential property value increase. I didn't do anything special. It's just we haven't seen the increases other places have. But we still have the questions, and we still are able to answer those questions to our taxpayers, and we want to continue to be able to do that with them. But we are here to help, just like Assessor Huxtable said. We know our data better than anybody, and we can help with any of the questions that you have, and want to be part of the solution.
Thank you. Senator McEwen has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just want to ask a hypothetical question to make sure I got my mind wrapped around the Constitution and the property classes. If we dropped every property tax to 0% in every class, as I understand it, that would not violate the Constitution, would it? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You want to take a stab at that, Ms. Huxtable?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not an attorney, so I will not try to interpret the Constitution, but my belief is as long as if they stay within that parameter, that you could do that. That's how I understood it. But again, I don't pretend to understand the Constitution. I would like to make one more comment, if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, please.
I want you to all remember, if you don't remember anything else that I say, no property taxes, residential, commercial, industrial, mineral, no property taxes that we collect at the county level ever go to the state general fund. They do not ever get to the state general fund. They may go to the schools. Obviously, they go to the schools, but they do not end up in the general fund. And I think that's a misunderstanding somewhere. I've heard some of those comments this morning. I just wanted to make sure everybody understood that property taxes collected locally do not go to the state fund. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Locke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just for clarification, I'm sorry, I'm going to ask the question a little bit different, but it was related to your comment. You made a statement about the constitutional issues. What what were you, what is the constitutional issue you were trying to bring out? You said that, and I think you were going through it pretty quickly. Was it sounded like it might be related to caps. I didn't know if it was related to the different property types. I was just curious what constitutional issue you believe exists, so we can understand that.
Mr. Chairman.
Mhm.
Representative Block, our interpretation from the Constitution comes back from prior bills that have been submitted, that there has been legal opinion that it's not constitutional. And specifically, when you don't keep those classes the same, residential is in the all other class. They have to be treated all the same as it is now. If you were to pull residential out, that changes the whole flavor of what we were talking about. But currently, under the way the statute reads, we believe that you could not treat residential any different than you would treat any other in that class. Does that answer the question?
Follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, that does answer. I didn't know if it was related to caps or the property types, so that helps. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Anybody else down here? We're here. Seeing none. Thank you. Thank you very much. Is there anybody else wish to testify on this
Actually,
subject?
can I, before Dixie
Oh,
leaves, Mr.
sure.
Chairman, thanks.
Not too fast, Miss Huxtable.
So as you're aware, and we haven't talked about it much, we do have, Mr. Chairman, a 2024 constitutional amendment on that very subject. I guess my overall question, do the assessors or do you personally have, is that enough to mitigate? I shouldn't say it'll solve the problem, but is that a step in the right direction that would give you enough flexibility that mitigates, eases some of the extremes we're seeing right now for this period? I know it's not the end all be all, but is that, in your opinion, a strong step in the right direction that we've tried to undertake?
Miss Huxtable.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Swanser, as I understood it, that constitutional amendment did not address limits in any way. So being able to treat residential separate than all the other category parts of that other class, yes, I think that solves that. Whether or not it addresses being able to put a limit on it and not be at full market, I'm going to defer that to the LSO and the lawyers. We will administer whatever you guys put out there for statute, as long as it's legal for us to administer it.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Yes, I do think if the legislature chooses to do something quicker, I think the homestead exemption is something that's currently on the books and can be adjusted. But if you choose to go that route, I would strongly suggest that you do it by jurisdiction, just like you did with the property tax refund application, because the value in Park County is not going to be the same as the value in Niobrara County or Goshen County. If you do it specifically to jurisdiction and apply that exemption, I think you can give people immediate relief much quicker. You don't have to wait for the constitutional amendment to either pass or fail, any fallout from that. You could, if you wanted to provide additional relief along with the refund program, the difference between the refund program and the exemption, the refund program, you have to pay the tax to get a portion refunded. The exemption program, it's taken off the top. A taxpayer doesn't have to pay the bill to get the money back. They can actually have that adjusted. It's very similar to the veterans exemption. So that amount is taken off the top and then the back tax bill is generated after the fact. If you're looking for immediate relief, I would strongly suggest you do it by jurisdiction. And that is something I believe that you could do much quicker than a tax cap proposal or anything else.
Going further on the jurisdictional issue on the point you made there, would it be easier for us to just get rid of the dollar amount and stick with a percentage across the board to take care of the jurisdictional issues that, like, for instance, Teton County, you have if we set a dollar amount in statute, obviously it's going to affect Teton County more than it affects Goshen County because Teton County is going to blow past the dollar amount.
Correct.
If we just remove the dollar amount, went with a percentage of the homestead exemption, wouldn't that solve the problem?
Mr. Chairman, that would be jurisdictional specific, but again, I would caution you, there are counties who just recently got salaries to where they could keep people retained in offices. There are jurisdictions, I heard stories when I first became an assessor, that the assessor had to, any bills that had to be sent out after the fact, the assessor had to pay for them out of her pocket because she didn't have any money in her budget to pay for the postage. You have counties who just recently have been able to provide health insurance benefits for their employees. So I would I don't know whether you will, but I would strongly suggest you consider a backfill measure for those smaller counties that really do need that residential value as part of their tax base. Otherwise, they're going to be right back where they were before.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, this time's for real. You're free to go. Okay, thank you very much. Yes. Oh, okay. Former Representative Sweeney, I hear you're on Zoom and you have a comment. There you are.
Sorry, I couldn't get back up there, and apologize. Pat Sweeney from Casper. I hope, there's some great takeaways, I think, from Park County Assessor Myers' study in detail. And there might be some good fixes with some of the bills that you've got coming up later today and tomorrow. On the constitutional amendment that's going forward in 24 for the vote, how that can really be effective, in my opinion, and totally in favor of that, is that gives the power back to the legislature to, if you want to differentiate and pull down that rate for residential where we're having the most problems. Say instead of 9.5 down to 7.5, or even 8. That's where that's crucial in my mind. So, and great discussion, but that's where I think you can do your best work, is if that gets approved. So thanks for allowing me to testify remotely.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Any questions? Any questions? Seeing none. Thank you, sir. Does that conclude our Zoom testimony? It does. Okay. All right. Public comment is closed. Committee. What do you think?
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, Mr. Co-Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, we have those bills up for tomorrow, so I think, we've got some time to kind of think about it, talk and get input from folks. And those are on the agenda. Let's just look, so folks are. That's 11:30, item 17 on the agenda. I believe, yeah. So, so we've got those bills ready to roll. So, okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes. Okay, committee. That closes out property tax limits. We're gonna go ahead and skip over lunch. Took care of that. Now we're on the property tax issues. We have a bill draft 24 LSO 187, the homeowner tax exemption. LSO, could you walk us through what our subcommittee came up with?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Josh Anderson, LSO. This is 24 LSO 187, working draft 0.4. The Revenue Committee last year had a similar homeowner tax exemption. It was 2023 House Bill 98. This one's a little bit different. And just to quickly walk through the bill, on page 2, Mr. Chairman, there's a portion of property used as a primary residence would be eligible for a homeowner tax exemption. It would be calculated as you see there. If it's a primary residence, it would be 25 6/10% as drafted of the fair market value of the residential property, not to exceed a total exemption of $200,000. So you can see, and there's a staff comment there. 2 things to note. Again, that rate is a policy choice. At the way it's drafted, the average home in Wyoming would get an exemption of $100,000, while a home of $780,000 fair market value would hit that $200,000 cap. You can see there, another thing we looked at was a 12.8% exemption would be an average home would get a $50,000 exemption, and then a home at 1.56 million would hit that cap. And the second note there at the bottom, and discussing briefly with the Department of Revenue, they thought it may add some clarity to base this off of the assessed value rather than fair market value. Again, it would just be changed throughout to assessed value, and then that would be a cap of $19,000 of assessed value, which would be the equivalent amount. Continuing on to page 3, Mr. Chairman, again, subparagraph B there just clarifies that not more than one exemption could be made to the same property in any year, and the application would be on the 4th Monday in May, consistent with some of our other ones. Then the definitions in subparagraph C at the bottom of that page. Owner there is basically the same definition of applicant that we have in the existing homeowners tax credit, which has not been funded. But just that language is consistent with that as to who is an owner. On page 4, basically just different types of possible ownership that would occur with the property. On page 5, subdivision 2 there, primary residence is residential real property where the person claiming the exemption actually resides in for the majority of the year. So there was some discussion of extending that out to say 9 months or something like that, rather than just the majority of the year. That would be where you would make that change. And then the definition of residential real property there. And then the staff comment at the bottom of page 5, again, the committee may want to consider whether to appropriate funds to reimburse local government entities for the reduction in revenue. And Dean would have those numbers, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Timothy.
Mr. Chairman, Dean Temte with the Budget Fiscal Division of LSO. We did come up with estimates for the fiscal impact for this bill as drafted. It's in, and the document I'm referring to is dated September 22nd, 2023, where we actually come up with a narrative description of all the fiscal impacts for all the bills under consideration at this meeting. So I'm on page 1 of that particular memo, in the estimate that the total fiscal impact is estimated at 84.6 million for tax year 2025, 87.1 million for tax year 2026, and 89.6 million for tax year 2027. Now, these estimates are based on the CAMA system data from the 2023 tax year, the most recent tax data that we have, the 2023 mill levies. It's one thing I would say about all these estimates or many of the estimates we're going to discuss is they're going to change a little bit depending on how some of the parameters in the upcoming October 2023 CREG revenue forecast change. These estimates will change as well. But this estimate is in part based on the projections from the January 2023 CREG forecast, specifically the projected non-mineral property value growth, and that is in the current forecast that's projected to grow at 3.5% per year for tax year 24 and each year after that within the forecast. These estimates are also based on the owner occupancy rates by county from US Census data. Again, and I would point out, these are actually the total mills, and the average mill levy for residential property of all residential properties in the state was just under 70 mills in tax year 23.
Okay, any questions? Yeah, Representative Locke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just for clarification on the numbers, so those numbers that you just mentioned, are those the amounts of that it would reduce the taxes? Is that what those numbers were meant to represent?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Locke. Yes, it is. These are the amounts of decreased property tax revenues, total decreased property tax revenues by tax year. And that would include the 12 mills that goes to the 12 state mills that go to the foundation program, the 31 mills, which is K-12 local resource, the 12 mills to the counties, the 8 mills to the cities and towns, and also the other district levies as well, such as the community college and other special districts.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And what is the actual, what are we looking at in terms of the actual taxes? Are they increasing in spite of these values of decrease, or is it actually truly reducing the tax income for these on the average? Can you give us a feel for that, how they impact the actual increase or decrease of the full taxes?
Well, again, these estimates are based on the 2023 values. And also built into this estimate are the projected increases in the property values in the current January 2023 Craig forecast. So that's what it's compared to. The calculation is compared to the property taxes anticipated to be collected under the current revenue forecast.
One more follow-up?
Sorry, I'm just trying to be clear in my mind. So that's the actual, those numbers would be actual decreases in the taxes collected for those years based on those estimates? To overall taxes, sorry.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Locke, these are the projected decreases based on the projected property taxes, based on the projected assessed values in the current revenue forecast.
Okay. Yeah, Mr. Representative Swanitzer.
I think maybe this is a broader question than fiscal, but is it possible in any way to break that out by county? I mean, I think you've heard as well as many of us up here that this is a significant issue in 5 or 8 of our counties, but some of our other counties that hasn't gone up. But this is a broad-based exemption across the board, and there's no way to not make it fair, equitable to every Wyomingite household.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Swanitzer, I will look over at my friend in the Budget Fiscal Division. Can we come up with those? And I'm not asking you to come up with them by county right now, but we have the data to arrive at those decreases by county.
Mr. Chairman, Taylor Dupont, LSO. That's correct. We have the ability to break out that estimated revenue reduction by county.
Thank you, Taylor. Question is, do we have the ability to pick winners and losers? I think we have to stick to broad tax policy as opposed to specifics, but that's just me opining. Senator Pappas.
Thank you. This exemption is reducing the tax income by 86 million or whatever the number was you just mentioned in each year. But there's a delta there, right? The actual tax, that's what we would be exempting and we would be not collecting, but the tax increase would be how much total, and there would be a delta between the two. So there still would be revenue above and beyond last year's revenue to the local counties and whoever's collecting the taxes or benefiting from the collection of the taxes. There is got to be some delta. I mean, we're not giving back everything so that we're net neutral for last year's taxes. What is the delta?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Pappas, I'm not sure if I'm understanding your question. I think I understand your question, but again, I would say this is the estimated revenue decrease, not based on the actual. I'm not talking an 89 point or an 87.1 million decrease from tax year 23 current. I am telling you, it's an 87.1 million tax year or $87.1 million per year decrease for tax year 25 based on what is forecasted.
Correct. Follow up. But what is forecasted, I guess maybe I'm not explaining myself correctly, but there will be in 25 an increase above and beyond the previous years, assuming it's up a certain percentage, probably bigger than what most taxpayers want to see. And that's what I'm trying to get at. If we do give this exemption, is it still in the order of 4 to 7% higher? What's left over? I don't know if I'm explaining myself correctly.
Would it be a cut in the rate of growth? I guess is basically what you're after.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Pappas, again, these built within these projections is a 3.5% per year projected growth rate in all non-mineral assessed property, including residential property. So the assumption under these estimates is that residential property will increase by 3.5% per year each year. Now, again, this projection may very well change with the upcoming forecast, and that's why I say this estimate may change as well.
Anybody else? Representative Block, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question on the $200,000 limit. Can you talk to the driving force behind that? I'm just kind of curious what put it at that. Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, again, that'd be a policy choice. I think as we had some discussions, I think it originally came from that lower number, that around that 12% cap, that an average home would get a $50,000 exemption, and if you had a home worth around 1.5 million, you would hit that cap. So that, I think, was kind of where that number came in, but you could certainly set that at anything you would want to.
Okay, committee? Looks like we're good. Anything further from LSO? Oh, yeah, co-chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just on the language on the definition on page 4 and 5, you said you borrowed that from what other statute in it?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, that's from the definition of applicant under what's currently in law as the homeowner's tax credit.
Right.
It hasn't been funded since prior to the constitutional amendment that created the different classes of property, but I just stole that language from there, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate you. Thanks for all your hard work. Is there any public comments? Like we have somebody coming up. It's a lot further walk than the old committee rooms to get up here. Welcome back to revenue, sir.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Jeremiah Riemann here on behalf of the Wyoming County Commissioners Association. I intend to keep my comments brief here. You're dealing with some difficult questions that the commissioners as well are dealing with as they try and work proactively with you to find a solution here. This certainly could be a positive solution in some places. I wanted to just focus my comments primarily on the revenue portion of this and whether there should be some mechanism to provide that relief to counties. You've heard a great deal from the assessors about some of the complications that exist in some counties. To highlight some of that for you just very briefly, Niobrara County only 3 years ago began offering health insurance to its employees. And it's only to the employee, not to their family and spouses, et cetera. So they're certainly dealing with some difficulties as they look forward. To give you some sense of how much additional residential revenue they're receiving now as compared to 2018, it's a total of $43,378. In Niobrara County, it costs about $100,000 to repair and maintain or build a gravel road, primarily because they have to bring aggregate from the south end of the county and take it to the north end of the county. So in that example, they were able to take care of about a half a mile of additional road as a result of that residential increase. And I want to make it very clear, I'm only here representing numbers that deal with the county portion. Obviously, they're the school mills, the special districts, municipalities, and other. Just in this past biennium, you've appropriated just over $141 million to counties and municipalities through direct distribution to cover costs that those local governments are bearing. And that's very much appreciated. It helped with some of the inflation costs that many of those jurisdictions are experiencing, including the 8 counties I believe it's either 6 or 8 counties that fall into that hardship category. So that means they can't raise more than $300,000 per mill. So this money is important to a lot of jurisdictions. Senator Pappas, I think your question is a good one, if I understand it. Do these decreases, are they offset by the increased monies that the counties have received through higher residential property taxes? And it'll be important to see that county by county data as part of this. But if I can kind of break it down just quickly, sitting in the back of the room, and of course, this is not going to be perfect math here, but of the numbers that are represented in the LSO memo, counties take about 17% of that loss there. That's just the way it typically breaks down in terms of revenue. So that means that year over year, counties are going to see about $15 million less in revenue. The difference between 2022 residential property taxes and 2023 is approximately 17 million. So on a statewide basis, you could say, yeah, the counties are going to take an additional $2 million roughly from residential property taxes. But if you applied it to the back years, back to 18, counties would have lost in every one of those scenarios year over year against that. And then one of those years, it would have been about 5 million loss. And in others, it would have been upwards of 10 to $12 million. It's just quick math as I'm sitting in the back of the room trying to look at this. So with that, Mr. Chairman, again, I'm just here to offer a request that you do give some serious consideration of backfilling and reimbursing local governments for the lost revenue. I'm here for the little guys in this equation that are going to take it in the shorts a lot more than I am the big guys. There are some that perhaps can weather this storm a little bit better. I'll just give you 2 last pieces of data here. Teton County is assessing roughly half of its total mills that it could assess as a county itself. So a lot of these equations that you're dealing with, you could reduce, paying to the homeowners, obviously, but the county could double its mill levy and probably take in about the same revenue. So they're in a unique position against all of these other counties that perhaps are at 12 mills, which of the other counties, only one other has less than a 12 mil levy right now. And finally, you're looking at exemptions that could go as high as 200,000. If you're looking at the eastern side of this state, that's their average median home price is about $250,000. Natrona County is not too much higher than that themselves. And residential property taxes make up about 50% of their entire residential property taxes. So these numbers county by county do make a significant difference. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll be able to stand for questions, but I certainly appreciate your consideration of the revenue replacement.
Senator French.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good to see you again. Does the direct distribution, I think we added an additional, what, 25 million last year? Roughly.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, it was 26 million this last year. You also the year before put, I believe, an additional $15 million that was based on a higher hardship formula than the traditional 105.
Does that increased rate, if that's maintained, and I don't know in this budget session if that will play out, but if it did, does that backfill the county's needs, their loss, whatever?
Mr. Reman.
Mr. Chairman, Senator French, great to see you as well. I would have to see those county by county figures to better understand the breakout and how it might match against direct distribution. Because I can't tell you right now whether they're a 1-for-1 match in the equation. I think the other problem that sits here for us discussing direct distribution is that this legislation, the way it's drafted, is permanent unless you come back and change something in the future. And direct distribution is something I'm having to come before you every 2 years or perhaps every year sometimes and duking it out to make sure that we get that. So it's not, from our perspective, until you put that into the green books, it's not a replacement for this sort of a reduction.
Senator Pappas.
Thank you. And this question is to anybody who can answer it. Is it possible, rather than to actually build in a an exemption amount, to actually have that calculated every year by county, some kind of a formula in here rather than an exemption amount, but a calculated formula based on, as you mentioned, some counties don't need it, some counties do, but come up with a formulaic driven policy where we actually don't put an amount in the statute, but put a policy in there for that rate to be calculated, maybe in rules and procedures or whatever. Can anybody answer me that question? Would it be possible to do that so that we can get, because one size doesn't fit all. Because I can see that we need to give folks, some help here on their property taxes, but we also, these same folks are also getting good services from the counties and the local folks, and we certainly wouldn't want to harm those entities who are serving our people out there. So, it's kind of a delicate balance. So I don't know if anybody can answer that question.
You might want to take a stab at it. Mr. Raymond, you want to?
Mr. Chairman, I think you brought up an approach where you said it's a percent, and that then goes against, say, the fair market or the average median home price of a county. I think there are ways to get at that approach. What I can't answer then is the subsequent question that might be asked, and whether that's fair and equitable and uniform across the state. And so I'm not an attorney. I couldn't answer that for you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Senator Pappas?
Mr. Chairman, but back to the initial point that Mr. Reman was bringing up. I do think that we need to do something statewide to backfill the local entities that are losing the funds, if indeed they are really losing them. Some counties may not be, and other counties may be, but I think we do need to look at the comment that LSO put in the back about making them whole again. I don't know how that looks, but I think this bill draft needs a lot of work if we're going to go that way.
Mr. Co-Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think, this is basically the same bill we had last year that in the legislature, and we did put a pay for in it and a time limit, to try to get us through the next couple of years, why these other reforms, which will take time with a constitutional amendment and further statute changes to take place. We've gone over this before, but it needs to apply to everybody on this situation because it's about the equity and how you treat people fairly. Now, if it was for the poor, we have programs like that and our Constitution allows that. But for a program like this, I think to treat people fairly and equitably. And I think the dollar amount or the percentage not to exceed the amount is a compromise that working with staff that the good chairman and I came up with that seems to kind of work in all these counties, because we have, as you mentioned, Niobrara to Teton, and how do you make that work? You do a percentage, it affects people differently. You do a dollar amount, it affects people differently. And so we thought this was maybe an elegant way to kind of compromise on that. So that's where that came from. So. But I think as we begin to work this bill, I think there probably will be an amendment to pay for it and maybe time limit it so we can always come back and look at it. I think it'd be an important thing because it is expensive but we're gonna encourage our colleagues to put their money into this and provide this relief for a couple of years for sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chairman. Anybody else? It's for Mr. Reman. Seeing none? Thank you, sir. Any more public comment? Welcome.
Good afternoon. I'm Bob McLaurin with WHAM. Much like Mr. Reman testified earlier, and I'll be very brief. We'd like consideration of some potential backfill if you move this bill forward. Cities are permitted to assess 8 mills. So that's an important revenue to the 99 cities and towns in the state. And like the counties, we have a wide range of economic activity from Casper to Opal. So we would just ask for your consideration as you move this bill forward. I would just point out that this would affect a lot of entities. I just happened to get my tax bill from Teton County yesterday, and there are 12 taxing entities on this bill. So it's not just cities and towns that would be affected by this, but conservation districts, hospital districts. So I would thank you for your consideration. Be happy to answer the questions.
Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further public comment? Anybody on Zoom? Nobody on Zoom. Okay. We'll go ahead and close public comment. Committee, what is your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman. Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Senator French.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Somebody brought up on page 5, second paragraph, I guess it's number 2, at the end of that paragraph, that they reside for a majority of the year. They brought up the question, what really does that mean? I think everybody in each county have people that go south for the winter for maybe 4 or 5 months, and they don't rent their home out or nothing. They have a family member or a neighbor check on their house while they're gone. So I was just curious, do we need to clarify that a little more or leave it alone? Thank you.
Well, we can certainly work through the bill page by page and we can offer up amendments as we go if you guys want to do that way. Does that sound fair? Okay, so page 1. Nothing. Page 2. Representative Locke.
Yeah, I would propose that we raise that $200,000 limit up that I guess that's the cap. The total, I think it's the not to exceed. I would propose we move that cap up some amount. I know some of my constituents, some of these people bought their houses at, 350 and 400,000, and they're being assessed that after 2 or 3 years of extreme hikes, they're being taxed at 800 and above. And so I think that the 200 is, in my opinion, is too low a limit. So I'd like to propose something higher, whether that's, I don't know, I guess I'd open that for some discussion, but I'd like to push that up to at least 3 or above is my thinking, but.
Is that a motion? You want to make that a motion or just open up for discussion? now?
I'd like to open it up for discussion because I guess I'd like opinions on that.
Committee, what's your thoughts on raising that cap? Anybody?
Good with 300.
Senator Ide.
Mr. Chairman, I think just to keep it short and brief, I would be in favor of raising that cap to $300,000.
Is that a motion?
Second, or I thought he already made a motion.
No, he was just wanting to have a discussion, but I didn't see a whole lot of hands come up, so.
I think, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, Mr. Co-Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I think the chairman and I would, that number we were looking at is just basically about half of what, the residential average market home in Wyoming is. So we wanted to exempt basically about half of the average or 25%. So that's why we came up with that number. The 25% would, roll all the way up to well, I think it goes up to about 780,000. So about 25% of your property taxes would be exempt, would just disappear. So it's a 25% reduction. Currently, the way it is for those high, yeah. So I don't know. Yeah, I guess that's where we came to it, basically to exempt about half of the average. So that's where we're looking, but it's 25%. So that was the number.
Representative Block.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Then I'd move to bump it to 300,000.
Okay, motion
Second.
seconded by Senator Ide. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none, Representative Zawannit, sir.
Just want to make sure I understand. So it's up to $200,000 up to 25.6%. So right now your house is roughly 800,000 and above, you're fine, but with this, it's gonna go to 1.2 million. And I guess I'm not at the point where people who have a $1.2 million house need that large of an exemption. When the statewide market average, I think, is barely at 300 in Wyoming right now. So I'm just not gonna be in favor of it because I think it's too broad of relief and it's not targeted correctly.
I would just say, so a lot of people didn't expect that their homes would be listed at fair market value over $1 million. And some of these hard hit areas, like Representative Locke was mentioning, they start out at around 350, and with it doubling every couple of years, before you know it, you're up over $1 million valuation. And that's where a lot of the folks are getting upset. So, you know, you can see it both ways for sure. Co-chairman?
Mr. Chairman, could I ask our staff a question? In the middle of this? Just, I mean, and to qualify for this, of course, you could still qualify for the, you know, the rebate program and the county rebate program. I mean, this has no effect on income. This is for everybody and wouldn't affect those programs at all. So those 8,800 people who got those rebate checks are going to get a further reduction. It wouldn't cut them out of that program, would it? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, no, I don't believe so, other than would it change any calculations as far as how much they paid? I don't know, Mr. Chairman. But no, it wouldn't on its face cut them out of the program at all.
Okay, thank you. Somebody else on the motion? Question being called. All those in favor of Representative Locke's motion to raise the cap to 300,000, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
Pretty close. Can I get a show of hands? All those in favor, raise your hand, please. I can get a count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 7. All those opposed? Six. And, 7. Okay, so that motion has failed. Back on the bill. Let's move on to page 3. Any amendments on page 3? Page 4. Page 5. Yes, Representative Northrup.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On page 5, line 7, it says a majority of the year. I would like to strike majority and say for 9 months of the year.
Okay, heard the motion. It was to strike majority on line 7 and replace it with 9 months. Yes, Representative Bear.
Just a question. I assume that majority of the year means 6 months plus 1 day. Is that, do we all
Correct,
agree that's
yeah.
what that says? Okay.
Unless we change what the definition of a year is, which you could have, I suppose. You never know these days.
Constitutional.
Senator French.
I guess I'd like to see that dropped down to like 8 months. Because I do know people that,
Senator French, we haven't had a second yet, so.
all right.
Okay, it's been second. Please proceed.
I'd like to drop that to like 8 months, because I do know people that leave in October, and they're gone October, November, December, January, come back sometime in February. So, you know, they're gone for more than 3 months, I guess is my comment.
Is that a friendly amendment?
Mr. Chairman, I consider that a friendly amendment and would accept it.
Okay. Second's good with it. So it would now read, we'll strike majority and it'll say 8 months of the year. So any further discussion on that proposed amendment? Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? The motion's been adopted. The amendment's been adopted, I'm sorry. Any other amendments on page 5?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Co-Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I think staff I can give you the concept, but really it would affect, you probably have to put a new section in with pay for on a 2-year program. That would be, I think the dates then would be on section 2 at the bottom, effective January 1st, 2025 and ending January 1st, 2027, or LSO needs to fix those dates. But basically a 2-year program, be 70 million, 180 million pay for this over the biennium. And then gives us time for these, like I say, the constitutional amendment and all those things to kick in and provide relief over that bridge period. So that's my amendment, pay for it basically, time limited.
Is there, just for clarification, is there a dollar amount for the pay for or just a time, a sunset date?
Mr. Chairman, I think the dollar amount is in the memo. I think it is, it's roughly 87 and then 89 million the second year, if I recall off of failing memory, but I think LSO could firm those numbers up.
Mr. Chairman, those are the estimates based on the January forecast. And as I mentioned, these estimates will change a little bit with the October 2023 forecast. So it would be my suggestion to perhaps base it on those 2 years worth based on the new forecast, which
New forecast.
could be a little bit higher.
Mr. Chairman, I think we want to have the close, so based on the October forecast, give LSO the ability to put those numbers in. We know it's going to be in the high 80s, low 90 millions a year probably. So it's going to be a roughly $180 million expenditure over the biennium from the general fund.
Mr. Chairman, roughly about that 180, 190.
And clarification that you just said the general fund, that's where the money's gonna come from, not the LISRA or anything else.
Right, correct. That's
Okay.
place to appropriate from. Absolutely. Thank you, Mr.
Is there
Chairman.
a second?
Second.
Seconded. Okay, further discussion on this amendment? Yes, Representative Bear.
I'm going to propose an amendment to the amendment that we do this backfill with two caveats. One would be a blanket 60-40 split between the state. So that rather than 100% backfill, it's a 60% backfill of these numbers that we were given by LSO. And the other thing I would suggest is that we do it on a basically a grant basis where each county would apply for this. So, and maybe we could graduate it so that those counties that are considered hardship counties might be able to apply for 100%. Complicates it a little bit, but I think this is appropriate.
You thinking? Is that friendly or you want to take up yours first? And then let's take up the First Amendment first and then we'll come back to that. And then any discussion on the co-chairman's amendment? Okay. I'll just say I have a hard time with the backfill concept because it's like taking money out of one pocket and putting it in the other. If we're going to do tax relief, it's got to be, we got to just bite the bullet and do it. And the taxpayers need relief. And we always trip up over the backfilling. And that's why we don't get anything done. And we heard this morning, people want us to get something done and they want us to act. And we keep freaking out over what it really amounts to 2.86% of the general fund budget, the 84.6 million out of $3 billion budget is less than 3% of the budget we're squabbling over. So I just don't think backfilling is as important as we need to. Maybe Representative Bear's onto something. If we do something of an application basis for needy counties, I could probably support that, but I'll probably vote against just a blanket backfill altogether. We'll go to Representative Oakley and then Senator McEwen.
Thank you, Chairman Biteman. I just want to discuss in response to that, something that I think is really key, and which is what we're doing here, which is what is the source of the information of the dollars and the revenue and where does it go? So if we start changing these things to property taxes, we essentially can defund some counties. So we're taking it, yes, from state money, which might be from minerals, might be from oil and gas, might be from some other place. But if we start limiting the ability for counties to take property taxes, some of these counties will be left with nothing, or they won't have enough. We just heard some might have $50,000. So if we statutorily limit that and then refuse to give them dollars from some other place, they're left without revenue. So in understanding the systems and understanding the source of the dollars is important here. And so if we start just saying, okay, blanket, nobody in the county has to pay up to this amount, and this huge amount of money is left Some of these counties don't have a way, like 60-40, they won't have it. We're limiting their ability, we're taking away their ability to do that. Property taxes go to counties and cities. So I think it's important to understand what source of money and revenue we're talking about and who we're talking about limiting it and what that could mean for some counties. There would be some that couldn't even do the 60-40, arguably. So if we're going to take it away, then we have to step up and say we aren't going to defund your county, which is what the backfill is for. So if we're going to do these blanket sort of, blanket exemptions that take away $85 million from counties, we have to step up and be responsible, at least for some of that.
Thank you, Representative. Senator McEwen.
I guess I'm a bit confused. I thought we're headed into a budget session. And I think there are ways to solve some of that shortage through appropriations and trimming. As I've heard, counties don't have any money. But then I hear a guy saying we got this special district and that special district and this mill levy and that mill levy. At one point in time, you just got to question yourself. We're going to run around like banty roosters and say we gave the state a tax cut when really all we did was play a shell game, because the people in those counties are the people who are going to give us the money to backfill the counties. They're just going to do it through another source. So I go back to a statement I made earlier. If we're truly going to give tax relief, it has to come with lower spending or a cut of some kind, or we're just moving money around. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On in support of the amendment, I think the idea of these amendments are really I don't think this program will survive. I mean, you can't put this in statute and just say this is our only property tax relief. If it is, and I don't think we need to meet tomorrow, we can just pass this bill. But I see this as kind of a bridge over the next 2 years while the constitutional amendment vote comes out. Other bills that we have, from caps to acquisition value, all these bills coming forward, and it buys us some time to do that. But I think, are there some counties that this is not going to hurt? Take them, absolutely. Are there some though that are going to feel that pain in cities? Sure. And you can't, I think that's what we do, is we pay our bills. If we're going to take money and change a policy for them, then we as policymakers should find a way to make that right for them. And I think that's at the local level. So, there's going to be consequences, whether it's reduced services of some kind. And particularly in these non-mineral counties. And I know there's some of you that want to maybe treat counties differently. I hear you, and I think that's a different debate. But I think if we're going to run a program, we should pay for it. That's what we do. And so I encourage your support of it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Anybody else before we vote? Representative Block.
Just real quick, I'm against the amendment. I think that something more along the lines of the 60-40, I think we have to look at, as the senator previously mentioned, we've got to look at places where we're cutting spending. I mean, the bottom line is we're taxing the people too hard. That's the obvious point here. So I'm against the amendment.
Senator Ide.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just real quick, I'm against the amendment as well. A lot of good comments. We just got a report here that we've increased property tax levies almost $1 billion since 2017. And most of these counties have been the best, cities and counties, school districts have been beneficiaries of this. And like it was said before, you're taking it out of one pocket and into another. We need to look at spending more than we do backfilling this bill. Thank you.
Any further comments?
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I agree with my senator, what he said, but I think a lot of that increase in property taxes come from minerals. And it's come from mineral counties and it's come from Teton County. I mean, and somewhat Lincoln and then Park and probably Sheridan, but but it's minerals that's still driving it and driving our state, thank goodness. And it allows us to have an incredibly low individual tax burden. We all know that. And but so as we try to solve this spike in these property taxes, I think this bill is a good bridge to get us there. It gives an incredible 25% reduction. So anyway, I'd hope you support the bill. I'm just trying to get this thing so I want to make it so successful to the end. And that's why I'm bringing the amendment. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chairman. Good debate, everybody. Call the question. All those in favor of the amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
Chair's in doubt again. This is probably going to be another 7-7. All those in favor, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And Representative Storer, is that your hand up? You're a long ways away. I can't see you.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so that's 6. All that opposed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, that amendment has failed. We're back on the bill.
Question on the bill.
Question on the bill? Anybody else have any further amendments? And all those in favor of, do we need a roll call vote on this? Yes, we do. Okay, please call the roll.
Mr. Chairman, this is a roll call vote for 24 LSO 187 homeowner tax exemption. Senator Ide, or excuse me, Senator French. Senator Ide. Senator McEwen.
Aye.
Senator Pappas.
No.
Representative Bear.
Aye.
Representative Byron.
Aye.
Representative Locke.
Aye.
Representative Northrop.
Aye.
Representative Oakley.
No.
Representative Storer.
Aye.
Representative Strack.
Aye.
Representative Zwanitzer. Co-Chairman Harshman.
Aye.
Chairman Beitman.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, we have 11 ayes, 3 noes.
Thank you. Committee, let's take a quick break. Come back in about, 15 minutes or so to get something to drink and use the facilities. So let's take a 15-minute break and come back. Thank you. All right, let's call this meeting back to order. We're up on agenda item number 8, property tax issues, bill draft 24 LSO 188. Property tax exemption for long-term homeowners. LSO, please make your way back up and tell us about this good little bill draft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Josh Anderson, LSO. This is 24 LSO 188, working draft 0.4. And yeah, this bill would establish a tax exemption for long-term homeowners. On page 2 of the bill, you can see that a portion of property used as a primary residence by long-term homeowners would be exempt. The exemption in subparagraph A is if it's a primary residence, if their owner or their spouse is 65 years of age or older, and the owner or their spouse has paid residential property tax in Wyoming for 35 years or more, the exemption would be 50% of the assessed value of that residential real property. Mr. Chairman, the balance of the bill is then essentially the same as the last bill, with one exception on page 3. Starting on line 4, it just says that a surviving spouse of a person who qualified for the exemption would continue to qualify for that exemption. Again, then the rest of the bill is the same, and I'd turn it over to Dean.
Mr. Timty.
Thank you, Chairman Beitman, Dean Temte, LSO. If you're looking at the memo prepared to describe the fiscal impacts, I'm now on the top of page 2. The estimate for the fiscal impact for this bill is 10.6 million for tax year 25, its first year in effect, 10.9 million for tax year 26, and 11.3 million for tax year 27. This again is based on the projected growth in non-mineral property values from the January Craig forecast of 3.5% per year, which, as I said, this estimate could change a little bit with the upcoming forecast. It is also based on estimates of the proportion of individuals age 65 or older who have paid property tax in the state for at least 35 years. And this comes from U.S. Census data provided by the Wyoming Economic Analysis Division.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes,
Can I
Representative.
get through? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I get Dean to repeat those numbers? I didn't have pen in hand quick enough.
Oh, should,
Mr.
Mr. Chairman,
yeah.
Representative Northrop, in the first year, it goes into effect in tax year 25. The estimate is $10.6 million per year. For tax year 26, it is $11.3 million per year. Oh, I'm sorry. The $11.3 million per year is for year 3, tax year 27. Tax year 26 is 10.9. So one more time, 10.6 million the first year, 10.9 million the second year, and 11.3 million the third year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, one more thing I just wanted to note, we talking over there before we came up here, is that with the last bill you passed, and this one, there wouldn't necessarily be anything to prohibit someone from applying for both exemptions. So if you do end up passing both bills, that might be something you want to consider.
Thank you. Senator French.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to clarify, I'll just use my own situation as an example. Lived in a house, built a house, lived in a house for 40 years. Then I built another home and sold the house, and I've been in it 8 years. So I've been paying property tax for 48 years, but it's on 2 homes. So does this, are they talking about the 8 years in the house or the total of 48 years?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Senator French, yeah, I believe the intent is the total 48 years. So if you moved and you were just in your current house for 1 year, but you had paid property taxes in Wyoming for the previous amount of time, you would still qualify.
Yeah, Senator French, it says on page 2 of the bill, line 10, for 35 years or more on any residential property. So we're assuming that means cumulative, not just one house for 35 years. All right, gentlemen, thank you. Any, oh, wait, we have one question. I'm sorry. Representative Locke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just a question, did you guys consider any kind of graduated program, might be the wrong term, but program where at, say, at 70 or a person who lived in the state X amount of years and at 75, did you consider anything like that? Was that discussed? Pros, cons, if you did, I would love to hear that.
Mr. Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Locke, no, it was just this current request, as you see it, was how we've drafted it and how it was conceived. Could certainly do something like that, Mr. Chairman, but this is the way we have it now, is just the only way we've discussed it.
Thank you. Okay, any further questions for LSO? Seeing none, thank you, gentlemen. Now we'll open up the public comment. Is there any public comment? Welcome back, Ms. Huxtable.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dixie Huxtable, Converse County Assessor, and I'm just testifying on my own behalf. At the moment, the association has not taken a position on this bill at all. I have some concerns about the administration. I probably should have brought those up at the last bill as well, because this is going through the assessor's office. Potentially, we're looking at have thousands of people coming into our offices, filling out affidavits or documents of some sort, asking for exemptions. And so more than likely, we're going to need some more additional staff, which when it's not backfilled, the counties will have to pick up that expense, which we'll deal with that. But with this bill specific, it's looking for age limit, and it's looking for number of years where residential property taxes were paid. I have no way at all in my office of validating anything about how many years someone has paid residential property tax. I have no idea if the treasurer's office has that statistic or not. I'm not very comfortable making people show me their age either. I'm not looking for birth certificates or anything like that. So if the intent is for us to validate that in some manner, there's not a lot of teeth here for us to do it, but it looks like it is the assessor's going to be the assessor's office that gets to do that. So I would just be concerned about how that language of having paid taxes, as long as it's an affidavit that the department drafts and they sign it, and that's all it takes. And the legislature is good with that. I think there'd be a little problem with the assessors being able to enforce this or investigate if any of those claims are not accurate. I'd stand for any questions.
Yes, Representative Oakley.
Thank you, Chairman Beitman. Thank you, Ms. Huxtable. I don't know if this helps anything, but because this just says the way it's written, paid residential tax. If we switch that to owned residential property, I mean, isn't that something that's within the records of the county assessors as far as the ownership of the land? Isn't that attached with it? Maybe I'm making it too simple.
Ms. Huxtable.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Oakley, we do have the records to go back from the beginning of time. Our computer systems, we got into this digital world. My computer system starts in 1997. So that would mean for anybody prior to that, I'd be doing the research to see who has it. The treasurer's office has tax rolls that they keep a longer retention record than we do. Our retention schedule does not require us to keep those schedules that long. So it would take some additional work on our office to do that, which I'm happy to do, but I'm probably going to need a little bit more staff than I have right now, because we just passed a bill for the homestead exemption. We have veterans coming in at the same time, and that's when we're setting values and doing the last of our valuation process. So the timing, I would also maybe suggest that the fourth Monday in May, and I know why that was created, probably following the veterans exemption, because that's the fourth Monday in May. But we have to have our abstracts in by June 1st. That does not leave a lot of time between when they turn them in and we validate the amount of an exemption and then submit this to the state board of, or to the Department of Revenue. I think maybe May 1st might be a little bit better timing for all of us to get this done. Just a suggestion.
Thank you, Ms. Huxtable. So going back to the 1997 thing, are most counties in that similar situation where the things started going electronic in the late 90s? So if we bumped it from 35 to 25 years, get us into the digital age where we can more quickly ascertain whether or not they've paid property taxes in Wyoming for the last 25 years electronically?
Mr. Chairman, I couldn't say to everybody, the system that my county is on is a Tyler Tech system, and most of them came on in the late 90s. So presuming if they all came onto that at the same time, but I know of at least 5 counties that are not using that. So I have no idea what their records would be. I truly don't.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions for Ms. Huxtable? Thank you, Ms. Huxtable. Mr. Raymond?
Good afternoon again. I'm Jeremiah Reeman here on behalf of the Wyoming County Commissioners Association. I don't have a position on the bill right now, but I will say that a number of counties have indicated a desire in the sense of being more targeted, of having some sort of an exemption program or freezing of property taxes for an individual once they hit the age of 65. And so, but I do think that there are perhaps some other options you could also consider as you look at this particular approach. Currently on the books in Wyoming, we have an elderly and disabled property tax refund program that's at 3911-109C. It hasn't been funded for a while, and I would say that's because the value of it isn't all that great. And so you would certainly have to look at modifying some of the parameters of that particular program, in particular, the income parameters. Another option, and I'll probably be a broken record on some of this, but providing those options at the local level is also helpful. You've afforded the county option property tax refund program, but we don't have an existing county option elderly or disabled program. And I think that your own LSO staff analysis from the past couple of years have indicated those programs are constitutional from their perspective. In my research and looking at this particular issue, another approach that has been taken in Tennessee in 2006. The voters there passed a constitutional amendment whereby, and the legislature retains the power to set some of the parameters, but the counties then have the ability to implement a property tax freezing program once an individual hits 65. As I understand it, the presumption being that you've been working up to about that time, you hit 65, county can freeze your property taxes, and they're not going to move over time, and your fixed income presumably can accommodate that previous assessment that you were at. Now, if you make an improvement, you buy a new house, things would reset in that county or in that state. But at the very least, it's an approach that allows for decision making at the local level and them getting to make a decision about the tax levers that are pulled here, which a lot of these options don't. You get to make those decisions, the counties do. So I just throw that out as another option that you could examine here. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to stand for any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Raymond. Any questions? Any questions? Seeing none. Thank you, sir. Okay, who's next? Last but not least, right?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Committee. I'm Tom Laycock, AARP Wyoming, statewide Associate State Director. We're a membership organization for people 50 and over. We're nonpartisan. We have about 80,000 members in the state. Want to thank you for taking the time to consider our membership with this particular bill. Since the property tax refund changed eligibility last year, we've gotten fewer calls in terms of older adults who have been are concerned about being taxed out of their particular home, but we do still get some. And we certainly want to be sensitive to that. So we appreciate what you guys are doing with this particular bill. We have kind of done a quick analysis on other states, and we've seen about 26 other states have something that allows for folks 65 and over. There's another 10 that allow for sort of a local or a county option, similar to what Mr. Riemann was talking about. So what you're doing isn't real, super new. We see a lot of them that will take an existing program such as the property tax refund program. And it's just as you're looking at sort of the 11 tiers that, are being proposed, they sort of add a tier in there for older adults. We see some other ones that offer just a straight up exemption. Various ones have various levels of how much money you can make within that exemption. And then we see some, for example, the state of Texas locks in where you're at when you turn 65, and that's the age that's the amount you pay sort of for the rest of your life. So I very much appreciate you guys looking at this, considering our members, and we thank you for the statement that you're making with the bill.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Laycock? Yes, Representative Locke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you. And can you tell me some of these other states, this has a 35-year, you've paid taxes in our state for 35 years. Some of these other states, how do they deal with people, what's common? Is some amount of time in the state required? What's typical? Is it 10 years? Is it 20 years? Do you have a good feel for that? I would assume you would have a good body of data to discuss that. And if you could, that'd be great. Thank you.
Mr. Laycock.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Locke, it's a little bit all over the board. We're seeing some that are just 5 years. We're seeing some that are 20 years. And I did see one on this list that's 30. That said, I'm happy to look into it a little deeper and get more of a specific, here's kind of what we see in terms of which states have what kind of requirements. Happy to share that.
I follow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And yes, I would say that I would like that and I'd like to make that available, but thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none. Thank you, sir. Okay. Any other public comment? Nothing on Zoom. Nobody's charging the podium here in the room, so we'll close public comment. Committee, what's your pleasure?
Move the bill.
Bill's been moved. Second, I'll second it. Seconded, okay. Any amendments on page 1? Yes, Representative Oakley. Oh, okay, page 2 it is. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman Biteman. I would move page 2, line 10, reducing it from 35 to 30 years.
Okay. Is there a second? Seconded, yes, okay. Moved and seconded, any discussion? Hearing none?
Question.
Oh, Representatives wanted, sir.
And I guess it's maybe broader discussion. So what concerns me about the whole bill is the weird incentive in this, that if you're 30, you better go buy a house in Wyoming if you're going to be here for 35 years, right? Because if you're already thinking ahead, and most 30-year-olds are not, they are likely not thinking, hey, I'm going to get half of my property tax here in 35 years. And it's anywhere in Wyoming, which I think is probably good. So reducing that to 30 is probably good. That means a 35-year-old, and I would hope most 35-year-olds who are going to stay here long term will settle down. It does concern me, and this is abstract to the amendment, but if you're renting a renter, you're just SOL on the whole deal. You actually have to buy a piece of property, and I don't know, it seems kind of unfair, especially for the population, which I think we're talking about, who needs some of this relief. But I do believe the amendment to 30 would be a welcome change to the bill.
Okay, good discussion. Yes, Representative Oakley.
I don't, this is just silly, I guess, as far as discussion, but I mean, you have to be a property owner to be paying property taxes. So this like, it doesn't hit renters, but that's part of it. It's because property owners that are paying our property taxes. So, are we gonna go, I want to make some more comment, but are we gonna finish going through the bill for amendments first? or-
We got one on the table.
Yeah,
If you want
vote on
to
it.
dispense of it, we can do that right now. Any further discussion on the amendment to strike 35 and replace it with 30? Yes, Senator McEwen has a question.
I understand what we're saying, that people who rent don't pay property taxes. But I will tell you, people who rent do pay property taxes, or the cost of the property tax through rentals, because the renter still has to collect that money to pay the property tax on it. So in a lot of these bills we're looking at, I would just point out that in our zeal to help people who really need help, we kind of turn around and sort of hurt some of the people who need help. So the guy who owns a rental property, if he got some property tax relief, yeah, I believe 9 times out of 10, the rent would go down and you'd help the renter that way. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment to strike 35 and reduce it to 30, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed?
No.
That amendment has been adopted. We're back on the bill. Representative Oakley, did you have another amendment? Oh, okay. Any other amendments on page 2? Page 3? Page 4? Page 5? Any discussion? Representative Oakley?
Thank you, Senator Biteman, Chairman Biteman. I'm really not doing that on purpose. I just wanted to express support for this bill. There's been discussion, I mean, obviously, about all the different ways of taxation. This is one that actually is relief for somebody who has invested in Wyoming. If you've lived here, you've paid your property taxes for 30 years, you know, you get closer to being like, I'm done. I've paid in to my community. I've been here. I've paid my taxes. You know, there was some discussion about like moving here is investing in Wyoming, but it's just living here in and of itself is not investing in Wyoming. This is relief for somebody who has long-term committed to Wyoming and paid their taxes. And there should be a point at which you say, this is mine, you know, I'm free and clear. Now, this is only 50%, but well, only it's significant. It's not 100%, but so I think as far as property tax relief for long-term committed Wyomingites, this is a good step.
Thank you, Representative. Any other discussion?
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, Mr. Co-Chairman.
Chairman, and did you?
Well, I see Representative Storer has got a
Okay.
question, but if you want to,
Oh, go ahead.
okay.
I don't, whoever you want to.
Oh, we'll go with you and then we'll go with. Mr.
Okay.
Sto-
I just want to echo Representative Oakley, and she's the one kind of brought this idea forward back in our last meeting, but I think, and these are the people I've really been hearing from. You know, and I think, and I keep referencing the handwritten letter we got from Teton County. This will be exactly for that person. And I guess, but my question on the bill, I want to make sure, and I think staff brought this up, if you qualify for this exemption, do you qualify for other exemptions? And that's, I just want to make sure we've thought about, maybe we don't have to worry about it today, but it's something we need to think about as we move forward with this, just to bring that up. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Representative Storer.
Thank you, Chairman Biteman. I would like to go back to page 4, subparagraph C, Roman numeral 2. Again, the discussion of the definition of primary residence, and suggest an amendment that this be similar to what we just did, rather than resides for a majority of the year, to turn it to 8 months of the year.
Yeah, I'm not seeing, are we on the? Oh, there it is. Okay.
Sorry, line
Yes.
19, page 4,
Okay,
So-
committee, did you see that?
last bill.
Gotcha. Yeah, that should be 8 months too.
Yes. Did you make that as a motion? I'm sorry.
I will make that as a motion.
Okay, seconded. All right, so motion and second. Committee discussion,
Question.
question being called. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? That has been adopted. We're back on the bill. Any further discussion? Anybody? Okay. Oh, yes, Senator McEwen and then Senator Ide.
I also like the bill. My only concern with the bill is, and I'm glad we reduced it from 35 years to 30. I'd kind of like it to see more in the 20 range when people start really settling down in their 40s now. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Ide.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a clarification in here. Take, for example, a primary residence above a storefront in a commercial area, and somebody that's operated their business, a bakery for the last 30 years, and they've lived above the bakery in a commercial district. Does that qualify under this bill? Does anybody have any comments, or LSO want to chime in on that? Thank you.
Senator McEwen says he can take a stab at it. We'll let him go and then.
In that situation, and once again, I'm not a lawyer either, but I do understand some tax code. Depending on how the owner of the bakery is organized, if he's organized as an S corp or an LLC, he will be required to rent the property from himself. So he will in turn kind of be a renter. And the example I can use on that is I have 2 supermarkets. And the building loans and the way it's organized, I'm personally responsible for, and all that lovely personal property in it that the state loves too. I have to pay rent to myself to use those buildings for the business in order to receive the LLC or the S corp protection. Now, if the guy's organized or the girl's organized as a sole proprietor, then she owns it all or he owns it all, and it's not a rental situation. But the question I think that needs to be asked is the top still going to be considered residential, or is that still part of the commercial property? Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Josh, do you have a?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So if you look at the bottom of page 4, subdivision 3, there's a definition of residential real property, which means property improved by a dwelling designed to house not more than 4 families, and includes up to 1 acre of land. The dwelling may include any type of residence, including a single family home, individual condominium unit, mobile home, or trailer if the dwelling is used as a primary residence. So yeah, I think it would be, partially how that language is interpreted, but I think, a dwelling above a business would likely qualify, but.
Thank you. Mr. Senator Ide, does that?
A
answer?
quick follow-up.
Yeah.
Senator McEwen brought up a good question on that. If, you held that in, if it was in their personal name, that commercial property, but if it was in an LLC or an S corp, would that qualify under the way this bill is written, kind of like a agricultural LLC of a 1 acre parcel that may still be in a corporate name? Thank you.
Josh?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So then if you look at the definition of owner, starting on page 3 and going over to page 4, subdivision 3 addresses a person who occupies a residence owned by a corporation primarily formed for purpose of farming and ranching. So that part is at least specifically addressed. I don't know. And then there's a partnership, again, formed for farming or ranching. and also one held in trust. So there are some different ownership forms in there, Mr. Chairman.
Any further discussion? Seeing none. Question being called, will you please call the roll? It's been moved and seconded. Yeah, the sponsor was a committee.
Mr. Chairman, this is a roll call vote for 24 LSO 188, property tax exemption for long-term homeowners. Senator French. Senator Ide. Senator McEwen. Senator Pappas. Representative Bear. Representative Byron.
Aye.
Representative Block.
Aye.
Representative Northrup. Representative Oakley.
Aye.
Representative Storer.
Aye.
Representative Strack.
Aye.
Representative Zwanitzer. Co-Chairman Harshman. Chairman Beitman.
Aye.
14 ayes, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Clarissa. All right, our final item on the agenda right now is item number 10, property tax issues, bill draft 24 LSO 183, mill levy amendments.
Is there a hard copy available?
You have a hard copy available?
A couple of them.
Couple? Oh, they were in the pile. Yeah. Thank you. Can you please walk us through the bill?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Katie Adams, LSO. This is in your materials that you received this morning. You should have had a copy of it on your desk this morning. So this is 24 LSO 183, mill levy amendments, working draft 0.4. The bill draft addresses mill levies related to the Legislative Stabilization Reserve Account, which I'll refer to as the LSRA. It also addresses mill levies related to special districts and then also to education. And so beginning with the LSRA, pages 1 through 4 concern that account. Section 1 of the bill creates a new statute, section 9-4 219.1, levy of state tax disposition of funds. Under subsection A, between July 1st and July 10th of each year, the state auditor is required to determine if the unobligated, unencumbered LSRA balance is less than 500 million. If it is, then the state auditor must immediately notify the State Board of Equalization. The state board then must direct the boards of county commissioners to levy a special tax not exceeding 4 mils. Under subsection B, the money raised by the special tax is required to be credited to the general fund and then transferred to the LSRA. Under subsection B, the mill levy is in effect for the year that the board imposes it. And then it goes back and it would have to be reimposed in a subsequent year if those requirements were met. The staffing comment on page 3 identifies some issues for the committee's consideration. So those include what the LSRA balance must be for the state board to direct the mill levy, when and how the state auditor should determine that account balance. We have it set up right now as the unencumbered balance, but it could be different and based on the cash balance or some other basis. Whether the state auditor must notify anyone else, including the governor, whether the state board shall or may direct the mill levy, and then who will determine whether the mill levy is 1, 2, 3, or 4, and how they should determine that. Section 2 of the bill then amends existing statutes. So at the top of page 4, the bill draft amends section 3913-104A1 to cross-reference the statute that I just discussed. Accordingly, it states that there shall be annually levied and assessed a state tax not to exceed 4 mils pursuant to 9.4.219.1 as certified by the board to be credited to the general fund. The remainder of the amendments on page 4 concern special districts. So section 3913-104K is amended to specify that the Board of County Commissioners shall not certify tax levies for a special district whose total accumulated reserves exceed 7 times the special district's current adopted budget under 1612-408. And then that reference statute just requires the special districts to adopt a budget. Pages 5 through 8 then concern the levy of state tax for education. Under current law, there shall be assessed and levied each year a state tax of 12 mils on the dollar for the support of public elementary and secondary schools, except as provided in subsection C. So this bill draft amends subsection C. As amended, between July 1st and July 10th of each year, the state auditor is required to determine if the unobligated, unencumbered public school foundation program account balance from the preceding fiscal year exceeds 500 million. If it does, then the state auditor must immediately notify the State Board of Equalization. The state board must then lower the 12 mils for the next year to 8, 9, 10, or 11 mils. And then the mill would reset to 12 the following year, but it could be reduced if those same requirements are met. And then there's some similar staff comments regarding some issues for the committee's consideration related to the account balance, how to determine that account balance and when, who should be notified, including whether or not you want to add the governor and the public, the state superintendent of public instruction, whether the state board shall or may lower the mill levy, and then whether to specify how and whether the mill levy should be 8, 9, 10, or 11. And there's also some alternative language for the committee. And finally, on page 8, the effective date would be January 1st, 2025. And with that, I would stand for any questions and turn it over to Mr. Tempty. And then we also have Matt Wilmarth on Zoom to answer questions related to education.
Thank you, Katie. Are there any questions for Katie before we move on to Mr. Tempty? Okay, Mr. Tempty, floor is yours.
Chairman Beitman, Dean Tempty, Budget Fiscal Division of LSO. My description of the fiscal impact of this is on page 2 of that memo dated September 22nd, 2023. In the middle of that memo, I provided a table to give you a little bit of context what 1 mil, 2 mil, 3 mils, and 4 mils is worth dollar-wise. And basically, Mr. Chairman, the assessed value statewide is in the ballpark of $30 billion each year. So therefore, 1 mil would be worth roughly $30 million each year. And that table number 1 on page 2 just provides the breakout of that contribution of that 1 mil between mineral and non-mineral valuation. And then also provides a just an estimate what 1 mil is worth on the 2023 median value home assessment. According to the Budget Fiscal Division publishes a document on the LSO website, and it's entitled the March 2023 Long-Term Revenue Expenditure Forecast for 2023 forecast with 2023 general session final actions. Based on that particular document, LSO estimates that at the end of the biennium, LSRA balances for 25-26 and 2027-28 will be roughly 1.6 billion and 1.748 billion respectively. So therefore, underneath the current fiscal long-term fiscal profile under the current Craig forecast, the reduction of or the addition of the mills that would be triggered by an LSRA balance of less than 500 million is not anticipated to take place through FY28. Going on to the part of the language which talks about the school funding part of this, that same document estimates the end of biennium balances for the school foundation program at the end of the 25-26 biennium and the end of the 27-28 biennium to be 589.1 million and $765 million respectively. So it's possible that this proposed language could trigger a reduction of either 1, 2, 3, or 4 of the 12 mil school foundation program levy. The way the bill is constructed right now, it talks about and requires the state auditor to make this determination between January 1st and January 10th of each year. The one thing I would say to that is this will mean that this determination is largely going to be based on the cash balance at that particular time. On the fiscal profile and the long-term fiscal profile, I would distinguish those by saying the balances on those documents are considered the available balances for the biennium, and they're based on the accrual basis of accounting. And really, the balance, the July 1 available balance is not available until around 90 days after that, maybe a little longer. So the way this bill is structured right now, to have to do it that quickly, it would largely be based on the cash flow or the cash balance of the school foundation program. And the same thing would go with the trigger on the LSRA as well.
Any questions on that? Yeah, Senator Ide.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Temte, could you give us the sort of a number on the average of that balance over the last 5-10 years in that account? Do you have those numbers? Thank you. Just,
you know, Mr. Chairman, I'm thinking of a TV show where you can phone a friend, and I'm thinking of my friend at LSO staffer, Matt Wilmarth. He may have a better chance of giving you what those numbers are. Matt, I apologize in advance for kicking this to you.
In my best Regis impersonation, here's your phone a friend, and Mr. Wilmarth, to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Matt Wilmarth, LSO Senior School Finance Analyst. I don't have the average off the top of my head, or we can certainly identify those from our historical fiscal profiles. I will note we used to not zero out the balance, but leave $100 million in that balance, and then transfer any excess revenues to the school capital construction account. That was repealed in, I believe, 2017. And since that time, it's been able to grow over $100 million. I will also caveat that in fiscal year 2021, the LSRA did supplement the school foundation program balance to the tune of about $87 million to ensure that at least $100 million was left at the end of June 30th using the available balance methodology that Mr. Temte discussed. But it has ranged from $100 million to a little, I would say close, probably about $250 to $300 million within the past 6 years. But we can certainly identify that 5 to 10 year range for Mr. Ide.
Thank you. Any more questions? Yes, Representative Block.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to go back, and so this is the naive guy asking the question, so I just want to make sure I have it clear in my head. So the first portion of this about concerning the legislative stabilization reserve account. This is a completely new tax, is that right? This is a completely new tax that would be levied. The decision would be made by the auditor and of course, put out there and be added, put on top of this taxation structure. Is that right?
Chairman Beitman, Representative Block, it's already authorized in existing statute. So in 3913-104, it says that there shall be annually levied and assessed upon the taxable value of property within Wyoming and the following state taxes when applicable. And the one is not to exceed 4 mills as certified by the board to be credited to the state general fund. And so we're linking this new statute to that one that's already authorized. And so we're just clarifying when those 4 mills would be authorized.
Thank you. So it's not really adding a new tax. It's clarifying or I guess I just want to make sure I fully understand.
Chairman Whitman, Representative Locke, I think our understanding was that this is generally not levied. And so this is adding a clarification to allow it to be levied. So I think you could interpret that as a new tax if it's never really been used before, or it's just a clarification and now we're going to actually be using it. I think there's different ways to interpret that.
Representative Wanitzer.
Well, certainly Chairman Harshman can give you a better history of exactly how these 4 mills came about and what they're supposed to be used for under circumstances. My question, however, and if he doesn't want to answer it, I can give it my best attempt. Does this negate the power of the Board of Equalization to do it at any time? Right now, they can, from what I understand, the Board of Equalization can throw on mills. Does this automatically says they shall, but technically we're not taking away their power to be able to do this at any time. Let's say the Lizra was at 800 million. You can't do it twice. I want to make sure you can't do it twice, and that this power given to them 20 years ago is still in play at any given time, but it's a mandatory should certain conditions arise. Is that how you both read this?
Chairman Beitman, Representatives Wanser, that's the way I read it. So we're not, well, I mean, we are specifying when they shall raise the 4 under that existing statute.
Any further questions? Yes, Senator French.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I'm still a bit confused on this one. So if it drops below the 500 million on Lizra, they can they'll be assessed either anywhere from 1 to 4 mills, correct? So it can be viewed as a tax hike if it drops below that. Because somebody's got to pay those mills.
Chairman Beitman, Senator French, I think it's just, I don't know, it's hard to get that a clear yes or no when.
Well, it's all residential or all property, so.
Right.
If you own property and it drops below the 500 million, you're gonna.
And it shall be imposed.
You will be paying more.
Chairman Beitman, Senator French, yes, it is a shall, so it would have to be raised.
Any further questions? No, see none. Thank you. Thank you both. Yeah, absolutely. Representative
Just
Wanitzer.
because it is a little complicated, and this goes back 20, 25 years with the Campbell decisions and when we took over education of the state, and these 4 mills were allowed should they ever be needed, because we're actually paying less now than we were 25 years ago. By and large, that being said, my question, which I just lost because I was trying to explain how this all came about. It's going to come back to me in a second, Dean, as soon as you walk away, but I'll keep thinking about it and ask you later.
Okay.
Oh, I got it.
He's
Thanks.
got it. He's got it, ladies.
The
and-
problem, or I shouldn't call it a problem. One of the issues, and we started backstopping education, I think that's a fair way to put it, with the Lizra, is that people see the Lizra as for cash flow purposes. I guess my ultimate question is, what is the minimum that can be in the Lizra and still for cash flow before we have serious issues? Because you can't drag the Lizra down to 0 anymore. We've made it as a very flexible liquid fund that hundreds of millions of dollars come into and out of all the time. What's the kind of the base threshold of thou shall not go below this number without problems?
And Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, Representatives wanted, sir, the statute that's coming to mind in regard to that transfer from the LSRA to the school foundation program, I think there is a trigger that has to stop at a particular dollar amount, and I don't remember, and I'm looking to my attorney for some help. And it's in Title 21.
Mr. Chairman and Mr. Timpty, I can answer that question. The LSRA is cut off to the school foundation program account once the LSRA balance first is below $500 million. And once that happens, the LSRA no longer supports the school foundation program account. And that's found in Wyoming statute 94219. I believe it's subsection B.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make sure I understand this. I'm still trying to wrap my small brain around it. So if it gets to a certain point, and in this bill, it's 500 million. At that point in time, we will, or have the ability, or we'll have to do it because we're going to put shall in there. Put a 1 to 4 mil burden on the counties to backfill it. I just want to make sure I understand that correctly, and I might be wrong. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank
You
you.
want to take that? Or you want me to? Mr. Chairman, Senator McEwen, to be specific, it does say on page 2 that if the LSRA balance is less than 500 million, then the levy of from 1 to 4 mils would be, or that the state auditor would contact the Board of Equalization. The board would then direct the county commissioners to levy between 1 and 4 mils. And that in the staff notes, I think that's where it mentions it's a little ambiguous how many mils that would be.
There's a follow-up. We'll do a follow-up here and then we'll go to Mr. Co-Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the answer. I just wanted, really wasn't trying to get in the weeds on this office, that office over here, down there. I just want to make sure I understood the overall intent. And thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Co-Chairman.
Mr. Chairman and members, you remember our last meeting, and I think it was Senator French brought up about special districts and how the county commission, even if they're running a surplus, can't turn that mill off because they're separate boards. And so that's really where this idea, and then that thought was, well, let's include the 12 state mills, because if we have a surplus in education, then we should be able to turn some of those mills off. But then the flip side is, in that first page, what if we're in really tough times? Well, currently, the Board of Equalization, we've given them the ability to assess up to 4 mills. That's been around for 30 years. We've been close. We've talked about it a few times. I know, I don't know, but I think the different governors over different times have talked about this, and we've never had to do that. But that's out there kind of as a fail safe from the 70s when we had literally $70 in the general fund. And so that's where that really pulls in. So if you're down, if those 4 mills go into effect, that means the school foundation program zeroed out. The LSRA is going to be zeroed out, and we're getting pretty desperate. And so that's really the cut, be able to kind of protect us on both ends. We run the surplus, cut taxes at the special districts and the 12 state mills. And if we are in brutal times, allow the board to use those 4 mills to refill the LSRA, because currently they just go to the general fund. So that's my short take on it. Thanks,
Thank you.
Chair.
Appreciate that. And Senator McEwen has another question.
I'm looking at page 4, section 5, lines 12 through 15. And I'm just curious what metric was used to determine they can't touch the special districts until they're at 7 times the special district's current adopted budget. Well, why wasn't it 5, or why isn't it 9? Why was it 7? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Chairman Beitman, Senator McEwen, that was the directive the LSO received
It's a
in
placeholder.
drafting these
Yeah. just
as the
placeholder.
basis.
Any further questions? Yeah, Representative Straugh.
I guess my question was who asked for that? Who asked you all to direct? And I'm sorry, I don't ask enough questions. Chair. Sorry, thank you.
Chairman Biteman, Representative Strzok, that came from the chairman.
Representative Swanton.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Any idea how many current special districts or over have an accumulated reserve 7 times their average budget? I can think of 2, but I don't know if you brought that information with you today.
Chairman Biteman, Representative Zwanster, I do not know that information.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Zwaniter, I did look for some information about this. I did find some information on the Department of Audit website. And unfortunately, it did not have to do with 2023 special districts, but it had to do with 2022 special districts. Another thing, I found a report with financial information on all 674 of them. While this report, it does not talk about reserves, it does not talk about budgets. There were 2 pieces of information that were in that report, and what that had, one was total cash and investments, and one was total expenditures. So if you equate total reserves to total cash and investments, and if you equate total budget to total reserves, out of the 674, I counted 75 of them that may exceed the 7 times. I would also indicate, though, there are many special districts where their expenditure for the year was like $25. So there is varying degrees of materiality within that count of 75 for sure. But that amounts to a little over 11% of the total number of special districts in 2022.
Representative Oakley, do you have a question?
Thank you, Chairman Biden. Senator French and I are wrestling over the microphone here. Do you have any, I know that was this is just a real quick question, kind of a total, but do you have individual, like, I don't know if this is true, but I heard there was like a cemetery district in Campbell that had like $100 million or something. It's like there's some that is that accurate?
You know, Mr. Chairman, Representative Oakley, I would be happy to answer that question perhaps offline after I have a chance to look at the data just a little bit, if that's okay.
Thank you, Senator French.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I won. I got the microphone. This was first brought up, I think, by myself on the special districts up in our meeting in Sheridan. When I was a county commissioner, we were being hammered by a special district that had I think maybe 3 mills, authorized three mills. And the citizens come to the county commissioners and said, God, my word, cut their mills. They've got so much money saved up. It's ridiculous. It's not right. They're overtaxing us. So that's kind of where this discussion kind of started up in Sheridan. So we looked into it, and our county attorney checked with the state attorney general, and he said, you have no say in the matter because they're an elected board. But you as county commissioners who set the mill levies, you shall set their mill levy. So we couldn't help the citizens. This is kind of the start of the discussion up there in Sheridan. Now, this is a way to possibly help some of those that are maybe getting too large of reserves. Now the 7 times, I don't know what the magic number is. I didn't come up with that number, but it's something we might discuss, because that was our angst. It's like, you shall set the mills. But you also have no say in the mills. That elected board makes that determination. So it was like, well, what the, so that's kind of where this very discussion started in Sheridan at our, whenever it was, lasted into June, maybe. Anyway, that's just a little background.
Thank you, Senator. Any further questions for LSO on the bill draft? Being none, thank you very much. Any public comment? Any public comment?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, this is Matt
Yes.
Wolford, and I had an opportunity while the discussion took place on the LSRA balances to go back and review the historical fiscal profiles and the balance of the school foundation program account for Senator Ide's question. And as I indicated, for the 2013-14, the 2015-16 biennium, those balances were limited at $100 million each fiscal year, and any excess was transferred to the school capital construction account. So for those two biennia, the balance at the end of the biennium was at $100 million. For the 2017-18 biennium, the school foundation program balance was $310 million. I would caveat that, though, that there was a $570.8 million transfer from the now disbanded PLF holding account. And then at the end of the 2019-20 biennium, the ending balance was $232.4 million. And then at the end of the 21-22 biennium, the ending balance was at $100 million. So the maximum that over the past 10 historical biennia or 10 fiscal years, 5 biennia, the max was 310 million and the lowest was 100 million.
Thank you. Thank you, LSO. Any further questions? Yeah, Representative Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Wilmarth, can you tell us how many times that 100 million balance was supplemented from the LISRA account in the time span that you're covering here?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman and Representative Bear, one time it was in, and I think I misspoke earlier, I said fiscal year 21. It was actually at the end of fiscal year 22. There was an $87.9 million transfer at the end of fiscal year 22 to ensure a $100 million balance at the end of fiscal year 22. So one time.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions for either Matt or our staff attorneys or? No, seeing none? Okay, back to public comment then. Is there any public comment on LSO 24 LSO 183 mill levy amendments? Anybody on Zoom? Nobody on Zoom. Okay, committee? What's your pleasure? It's been moved. Moved. Is there a second? Hearing crickets on the second. Okay. Okay. Second.
Mr. Chairman, and I don't think there's, I guess probably move to table this, and I just think that it's kind of like 3 issues in one bill. And I think maybe we can go back and just skinny this bill up to just special districts and take a look at it in our November meeting. It'd be like a 1-page bill.
Yeah.
So probably skinny that thing up, so.
Yeah.
That'd be
Without
okay.
objection, I think that'd be the way to go. LSO, are you comfortable with carrying it forward to the
Thanks
next?
for all
meeting?
your work on
Thank
that.
you. Yeah, well, give us time to work it a little bit more between now and then. So, thank you. All right, committee. That pretty much clears the deck. Do we have? I heard Chairman Case might be hanging around online. Okay,
I'm with him 100%.
all right. Co-chairman Harshman has to get to practice. Senator Case, welcome to Revenue.
Hello, Mr. Chairman. How are you? Can you hear me okay?
Doing great. We can hear you loud and clear, sir.
Great. I wanted to just take a brief little bit of your time and follow up on our work that we did at your meeting in Sheridan when I was on Zoom and we discussed the potential for an electricity tax in Wyoming. And I just wanted to plant a seed with the committee about that. And you can thank Don Burkhart for this, because Don and I were at the Energy Council meetings and he said, I'm paraphrasing, he said basically, the electricity tax is a pretty good idea, but to get it to work in Wyoming, you should get rid of the sales tax on electricity. And it's like a lightning bolt came through there, because you recall the things that we're up against. One of which is that got something on my lens there. I don't know why I'm halfway off, but in Wyoming, where electricity policy is largely driven by other states. We're suffering through that now. You've all heard about the Rocky Mountain Power rate case. You know that we're tied up in this thing called the multi-state protocol, which is forces us to have policies that recognize some of the other states' actions, including what resources they want to use. Now, whether that protocol is going to continue in force as we move forward, I can't tell you that. But what I can tell you is we've ran into Commerce Clause issues if we try to tax electricity that's produced in Wyoming only for export. And we learned this numerous times. We've tried it. There was a railroad tax called the ton-mile tax we tried to impose years ago. That was Senator Bebout's idea, and we got shot down on that. So in order for us to have an effective electricity tax, it has to apply to everybody. I'm talking basically about a gross receipts tax on the production of electricity. So it'd have to apply to all electricity, the part that's consumed in state and the parts that is exported. Now, obviously, it's not very popular these days to raise the tax on electricity for our Wyoming residents. And they're suffering greatly, especially in Rocky Mountain Power territory, as changes overtake the industry. And, of course, Rocky Mountain Power is quick to say that this doesn't have to do with the transition to renewables, but it really does. And that's the big picture of what we're facing. More and more electricity will be produced in the future in Wyoming by sources that we don't currently tax very well. Now, we do have a huge and hefty electricity tax, and I remind you, we call it the severance tax on coal. And that is, a giant and powerful tax. It's built all these schools. It's been very good for the people of Wyoming. But how much coal we will be producing in the next decades to come, I leave that for you to think about. But the electricity mix will change, and more will be produced by different sources, including renewables like wind and solar. We'll have nuclear. We may have geothermal. I hope we spend a lot of time looking at that. But my point is, our old tax on electricity just applied to coal. And I should say some natural gas too, because we have a severance and ad valorem on natural gas. But new going forward, we don't have a mechanism to tax very well. Now, caveat, the wind industry is very quick to say that we tax them more than any other state, and that's just flat out not true. We do have a specific production tax on wind, but we're the only state in the whole mix that doesn't have an income tax, doesn't have a gross receipts tax, has very modest sales tax, very low property tax relatively, on and on and on. So we're not killing them with that $1 per megawatt tax on wind. But to help our people in Wyoming, we could implement a modest tax on the gross receipts of electricity, which will apply to everybody, but it'll raise an enormous amount of money. And most of that money will come from out-of-state people. In the case of Rocky Mountain Power, that would be about 85% would come from other states that are wanting very badly to place new production of electricity from renewables in Wyoming. and continue to rely on natural gas. The problem is that hits our own citizens who are hurting and don't want to see the price of electricity go up. That's where Don Burkhart's idea of getting rid of the sales tax is brilliant, actually, because it allows us to reduce electricity prices by an offsetting amount to the gross receipt tax so that our Wyoming citizens don't pay it. It's the Holy Grail, a tax we can export because our citizens will not see a net change due to the release of the sales tax. We could do it with an exemption. It'd be a simple bill. And to clean up all the electricity statutes, we would probably want to get rid of that wind production tax because they're also going to be falling into the gross receipt tax. That would take away that point of complaint. And finally, if you recall last time, I also talked about protecting our industrial customers by allowing all these companies to offset their tax liability with other taxes that are paid. And so if that were allowed to flow down to the large electrical consumers, they could choose their generation mix to be more lightly taxed because it would have more taxes that are already paid and less lightly affected or less affected by the new gross receipts tax. So that's the idea in a nutshell. And sorry, my phone's ringing. Our staff has the ability to investigate this. I've talked to Mr. Temke about it, and I would hope that you'd at least explore it. And it has a great potential to do everything that all of us would like, even if you're not sold on global warming or is very sold on global warming. But the bottom line is this is causing major impacts to Wyoming. And we should have the opportunity to tax the production of electricity just like we always have, but we called it a severance tax. So that I'm happy to answer any questions. I just want to borrow a few minutes of your time and plant that seed. I hope I was clear and hope you'll think about it.
Thank you, Senator Case. Are there any questions for Senator Case? Yes, Representative Bear has a question for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Senator Case. I was wondering if you have looked at Washington State's tax on greenhouse gas emissions, where they've been able to exempt their own residents from that tax. I believe it's actually included in the increase that we're seeing from Rocky Mountain Power, where Wyoming state residents will be paying that tax. How do you think they were able to manage that and yet we're not able to?
Senator Case?
Mr. Chairman, that's a really good question. There's a couple things going on with respect to that. We are renegotiating the multi-state protocol, but that negotiation has been on hold in terms of active development. So we'll probably be extending the multi-state protocol temporarily and then continue forward. That will certainly be an issue. I am on the multi-state protocol negotiating committee, and believe me, that is foremost on my mind. That is potentially an issue in this existing rate case. I'm a participant in the rate case, how they did it and we can't is always troublesome to me. But I think because they've won on environmental issues in the past. Recall they won on the port and that coal export port, and that was on environmental basis. It wasn't on an interstate commerce challenge, which is just too bad. I think it's a clear violation of interstate commerce, and Wyoming took the short end of that along with our friends in Montana. But this one probably would proceed along the same lines, and that's only speculation. Maybe your staff could look into it more. I'd be happy to work with him on it. And that's a really good question, Representative Baird.
Thank you. A follow-up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick follow-up. I want to add that the name of that tax in Washington is called the Climate Commitment Act. But don't you believe, Senator, that the onus is really upon our state to push back on the interstate commerce clause. And we really failed to do that back when we had the opportunity. And therefore, in this situation, it's incumbent on the state and our attorney general to be pushing back with this, what I consider a break of the interstate commerce clause. I think you would agree with that.
Senator Case, you agree?
Mr. Chairman, I don't put myself in the Attorney General's seat or the governor's seat, but it sure seems to me that this is a violation of interstate commerce and that there must be a defense for that. But I do bring about the idea that if we tried to do a mirror image kind of thing where we taxed electricity that was only leaving the state of Wyoming and not our internal use of electricity, that would raise a huge red flag. If we try to do it by means of picking generation types, tax renewables versus non-renewables with a general tax, that might get us in trouble. So I don't have the answers about Washington's actions. I don't like it. And I don't have the answer about what would happen if we were to pursue that harder, and maybe we should have pursued it. But I do have answers going forward that this is a very clean proposal to allow our citizens not to pay any more, but to have them be compensated in the state of Wyoming and local governments be compensated for the immense new generation that's being placed on our landscapes. And if I might just indulge with 1 second, Mr. Chairman, another issue is that, as you all know, there's a distribution of sales tax. A lot of it goes to the state, a lot of it goes to local governments. This will be a hit to the local governments with respect to not distributing electricity taxes. But it's a hit that's measurable because we would know those electricity sales and we know where they occurred. We just require the companies to report that. And indeed, we could backfill those. Now that was something we tried with the food tax. We talked a lot about when we repealed the food tax, we'd be able to backfill it for local governments. Truth was, we didn't have the data. Immediately the next year, the data was stale. And if you don't collect the data about where food's being sold, there's no way you can backfill it. But electricity is different. It's very easy to collect this data. We could keep local governments whole. We could make sure our citizens don't receive any increase in their cost of electricity. We could especially help large industry by allowing them to select electricity sources that are already taxed and not subject to the new tax. And finally, we could export the tax outside of Wyoming and claw back at the people on the West Coast who they could build wind turbines and solar facilities in their states. And if you look at Eastern Washington and Eastern Oregon, they look a lot like Wyoming. They have a lot of the same characteristics. California has immense open space where they could do this. And all those states share thousands of miles of coastland where coastal wind can be developed. But the truth is they don't want to do it. They view us as the sacrificial lamb in all this. Put it in Wyoming. And Rocky Mountain Power has dialed this in a very big way with 2 huge transmission lines that will come in next year. They're not in this rate case, but they're going to be in the one that's going to be filed after the first of the year. And if you've read about the project down in Saratoga, you know that transmission line has finally been permitted. That power is going to Los Angeles. And that is a huge amount of production, maybe as much between 600 and 1,000 wind turbines when it's fully expanded out. But this is just, by the way, that one project is about 0.5% of our entire state's land area. But if you've driven the Shirley Basin lately, or you've driven all these places, you know that we're under siege. And this would give us a way to receive money for us and for future generations, not for us, but for the state and for future generations of Wyoming citizens by this immense transition that we've all been talking about it and complaining about it every day it marches forward. And I don't believe it's going to stop. So anyway, thank you for letting me tag on to that.
Thank you, Senator. Any questions? Yes, Senator McEwen has a question.
Afternoon, Senator Case. How you doing?
Very good. Good to see you, Senator. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to go back to something you said. It's kind of related, but not related. When we exempted food from sales tax, I think I heard you say we didn't backfill it at all. Is that correct, Senator?
Senator
Mr.
Case?
Chairman?
Senator Case?
Mr. Chairman, I was actually there at the time. We didn't formally backfill it. I think arguably you could say that the distribution, the local government distributions are partially in relation to the food tax. I don't remember that connection being so A follows B. But the problem with the food tax, and of course, Senator McEwen knows it very well, is it changes over time. And the jurisdictional aspects of food sales change and evolve. And we would, in order to reimburse local governments for the exact amount of food tax that they're no longer getting, would require an enormous amount of data collection and where those actual sales occur all across the state in a very decentralized way. And food's not just sold at big stores. We all know that. It's so that's why it was hard to backfill that. But this Senator McEwen, the difference with this tax is the data is already collected by the electric utilities. We haven't. They assess other fees like franchise fees and so we would know where the sale occurred and how much the sale was for if we would choose to backfill it so that local governments would join us in supporting this tax.
Okay, any other questions? Any other questions? Senator Case, thanks for joining us late this afternoon and sharing your
Thanks for
thoughts
having
with
me.
us. Thank you very much.
Thanks, you guys. Have a tough job. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Take care.
We appreciate you. Thank you. Committee, we're at the end of the day. Any committee directives or last minute discussions before we wrap up for the day? Seeing none? Okay, we'll get home, get some rest, and we got a big day tomorrow. And thank you for your hard work today. This meeting will be adjourned. Thank you.